A boy named Hollow Vermillion was kneeling in front of his father, breathing heavily. Hollow is under the watchful eyes of his two brothers and Mrs. Sarah. He is taking a basic test for magical abilities, but he does not succeed, prompting him to attempt it again. If Hollow can pass this test, he will have the opportunity to learn magic alongside his brothers. Hollow's father holds high hopes for him. There are expectations for the Hollow to become a proficient magic user who upholds the dignity of the Vermillion family. Suddenly, everything blurs before his eyes, and he collapses once more. Hollow's father is furious with him, but Mrs. Sarah notices the signs and realizes that Hollow is overly sensitive to magic. Hollow's father angrily asks Mrs. Sarah about that, and Mrs. Sarah frighteningly explains that under normal circumstances, magic is sure to be found in a human's body. Magic is then used to draw energy from our surroundings, and it is then polished into what we call magic spells before releasing that energy. And the accuracy of spells depends on the amount of magic that the individual possesses. Further, she explains in Hollow's case, his body couldn't handle the magic that was inside him, and this resulted in his body rejecting it. The boy looks at his father nervously. Meanwhile, Mrs. Sarah continues to say that Hollow might also naturally have too much magic, or it could be something related. Hollow calls out to his father and waits for a response. His father told him that Hollow obtained this power at the cost of his mother's life, which shocks Hollow. After this revelation, Hollow's father recalls the past, recounting how his wife, Una, died after giving birth to their third son. The doctor had informed him that the child was healthy, and even without an appraisal ceremony, they could confirm that he possessed magic far superior to that of his two older brothers. The doctor noted that this terrifying magic belonged to Lady Una, and Hollow's father then began to look at his youngest son, Hollow. Filled with anger, Hollow's father states that despite Hollow possessing this formidable power, he still wants to make him the next head of the family. However, he points out that as the third son, Hollow cannot even use magic, and he shouts at him, comparing him to domestic livestock. Mrs. Sarah criticizes the Lord for his harsh words, but Hollow's father orders Mrs. Sarah to remain silent, reminding of her position as a private tutor. He concludes that a person incapable of using magic is unnecessary to the Vermillion family. Abruptly, he grabs his wand, intending to brand his son as a mark of his uselessness. He scolded Hollow to understand his own inability down to every inch of his being. In a sudden turn, Hollow's brother Auron tries to intervene and try to stop his father, but their other brother, Quen, steps in front of them. Quen expresses his agreement with his father's decision and loudly declares that this punishment is for the death of their mother, urging their father to proceed. Hollow felt bad and was about to cry. Mrs. Sarah covers her eyes with her hands, unwilling to witness the scene as the father prepares to act on his intentions. Out of nowhere, a magic circle begins to glow around Hollow. The main character, Hollow, cries as he looks at the palm of his hand where a brand has appeared. His father turns away from him, making a speech that the name of Vermillion represents a legacy of heroes. Hollow's father emphasizes that inheriting this legacy means carrying its spirit and will to protect the country and its people, noting that their dignity lies in showing bravery. His father goes on to express concerns about how Hollow will represent the people of this country without the ability to use magic. In the end, Hollow's father challenges his son to prove his worth using his own hands. Hollow's father leaves. He is not fully able to understand what has happened to his son with such a body. Meanwhile, Hollow continues to see the brand on his palm. A long time passed, and it was around 5 years, and Hollow now became a 10-year-old. Hollow is practicing fencing with Mrs. Sarah. He wins the match and celebrates his success. Over the course of the year, the boy achieved 158 victories, but he also faced 242 defeats. Mrs. Sarah tells Hollow that he will soon catch up to her skills. Hollow requests another training session, but Mrs. Sarah tells Hollow that she is no longer in her prime and lacks the stamina necessary for continued practice. She compliments Hollow on his dedication, noting that despite his young age, he has made major progress in fencing. Hollow comes to the realization that he will not improve in magic, and he decides to focus solely on swordsmanship only, despite any kind of difficulties he may encounter. Hollow goes to refill his water, informing Mrs. Sarah as he leaves. Mrs. Sarah then turns her attention to Quen, suggesting that he should work on mastering the trajectory of his magic. Quen confidently responds, telling her to feast her eyes on the results of his training. And he suddenly summons a fireball, aiming it at the target. However, instead of hitting the target, the fireball flies past him and towards Hollow. Quen casually apologizes and concludes that he needs to practice more. Mrs. Sarah is frightened and rushes to check on Hollow but finds that he is unharmed, despite the fireball flying at such an incredible speed. It was also unexpected, coming from his blind spot. Hollow stands confidently, holding a steaming sword. Mrs. Sarah sighs in relief, and she was happy to see that Hollow is safe. But they are both astonished by what happened as the Hollow actually cut the fireball in half. Quen, noticing Arlen's brother, quickly runs away. Angered by this, Mrs. Sarah warns that he will be reprimanded in the next lesson. Mrs. Sarah tells Hollow to go home as well, noting that Arlen has been back for a while. Hollow agrees and hurriedly leaves to find his brother Arlen, while Mrs. Sarah follows him with a concerned expression. She wonders if this is a force capable of destroying magic, but concludes that it is merely a fairy tale about a legendary hero, which is quite amusing. They all gather in the mansion where Arlen greets Quen and his father. His father asks if Arlen is enjoying life at the academy, and the boy confidently affirms the positive rumors about Regrace Magical Academy, stating that it offers high-quality education and has exceptional students. Proud of Arlen for being elected class president, his father encourages him to maintain his spirit before leaving with Quen to prepare for dinner. Arlen notices Hollow approaching and joyfully calls out to him. Hollow runs up to his brother Arlen with a smile and greets him. The elder brother notices Hollow's thin frame and questions whether he continues to practice magic. Upon receiving an affirmative reply, Arlen playfully ruffles in Hollow's hair. As they climb the stairs, Arlen advises Hollow to take care of his health and not to make himself sick, reminding him that if he does, nothing he eats will be absorbed. Hollow reassures him not to worry about him, and then his brother Arlen inquires to Hollow about his relationship with their father and Quen. Hollow shares that their parents still do not recognize his existence and that brother Quen still holds animosity towards him, trying to mask his feelings with a smile. The boy justifies their behavior by claiming he cannot use magic and feels guilty about their mother's death. Arlen, outraged by this reasoning, interrupts him and reminds Hollow for the countless times that their mother's death was not his fault, and although he cannot use magic, he possesses an excellent talent for swordsmanship. Sitting across from Hollow and holding his hands, Arlen encourages him to be proud of this talent and to never forget that he is his beloved younger brother. Arlen's words help lift Hollow's spirits, distracting him from the serious subject. The elder brother Arlen asks if Hollow wants to join everyone for lunch, to which the cheerful Hollow responds that he will likely grab something and run off to do practice. The elder brother teasingly recalls the Asbel Forest and asks if he still runs there. Hollow, full of excitement, agrees and tells Arlen to get ready because he will soon surpass him. The elder brother happily replies, acknowledging how brave Hollow is. Hollow then goes outside, heading to his favorite hangout spot. That place is located to the north of their home and within the Asbel Forest. It is a secret dungeon that he discovered one day while exploring. It was hidden away in the corners of the Asbel Forest. Hollow reminds that when he found the dungeon it was sealed with magic, but being oversensitive to magic he mysteriously found himself at the entrance of the dungeon. After spending 2 weeks around the boy, he and the monster had a great fight for the first time, and that fight taught him a lot. Due to his location, the battle was not like a regular training session. He could see how his swordsmanship had improved. Today he decides to look inside, and suddenly he finds a door guarded with magical locks. Hollow reminds him of the training of that day where he cuts the fireball of Queen with sword, and that was as if he reflected it by trying to defend himself, and he was sure that he could cut that with his own. Hollow used his sword to cut that magic chain and open the gates. The view was a spectacular view of the magnificent tree. He walks in and found a throne in front of him, which makes him surprise. Hollow goes upstairs and sees a sword thrown at the throne. Suddenly a voice is heard in his head. The voice asks who is here and how did someone manage to destroy the strong seal. The frightened boy screams and grabs his ear. He assumes there is a monster, the voice in his head still screaming at the fact that he dared to disturb his peace, and he closes his eyes and demands that the boy leave his head. After that comes silence. A quiet voice is already ringing, telling him to calm down and look ahead. Hollow opens his eyes and slowly removes his hands from his ears. He turns his attention back to the sword. It turned out to be the voice of the sword that was sealed there, as the magic sword itself had informed Kasumi. The boy smiled, as this was the first time he had seen a magic sword. He then asked why it was sealed, to which the sword replied that it was just a long story. Hollow assumed that the sword belonged to the Wizard King, but during the conversation Hollow realized that it was the sword of the hero. Hollow wonders why such a famous sword like that was sealed away in such a dungeon. Sword replied that it's because she was something that world was better off without, and after all, she didn't want to spend 600 years alone, and she wished that by leaving that place, she wanted to stand next to someone and go on adventures together with someone. Sword asked that a world without swords would be a better place. Hollow agreed with that and tell that the world still had its conflicts, but it's true that swords were no longer needed, and that was now a place where everyone uses magic. Kasumi agreed with that and mentioned that a hero no longer need a sword. Just Hollow mentioned that he need a sword. Hollow told the sword that she can become important again to this world when he offers to Kasumi to become his sword and they can explore adventures together. Hollow captured a new idea. He takes a sword edge to which sword becomes a bit angry with. Sword doesn't understand what Hollow is trying to do because the place was supposed to be sealed and can't be pulled out. Ignoring the sound of the sword, Hollow raises the sword. Sword can't believe what happened and wonders who he is. The boy then excitedly replies that his name is Hollow Vermilia, and in a world where magic rules everything, he wants to be the strongest swordsman. As soon as he finishes his speech, the blade turns out into the hand of the lovely girl, holding the Hollow's hand, and falls upon him. She introduces herself as Kasumi the Magic Sword. She was happy to meet him, with a smile calling him as dear swordsman. All the black sword that was lying in the dungeon suddenly turned into a silver-haired girl. Hollow doesn't believe Sword became a human. Kasumi then declares that she is one of the 9 sword wizards in this world, and she is the most special among them, and the only one who can take human form. Though she doesn't know much about the other 8 swords, she added that Hollow found a very rare item. Because Hollow removed the seal, the girl starts calling Hollow as a master. Confused by this, however, Hollow asks her to call him by name. The girl agreed with Hollow and started calling him by his name. Hollow was confused on how to bring Kasumi home. At this point, Hollow wraps her as a sword in a cloth and rushes towards his room, but on his way there, Hollow's father stops him and asks what he was carrying. Hollow replied by saying it's a sword. Further, he added that he found this in the armory during the weight training. After knowing this, Hollow's father immediately loses interest in him as he takes no notice of the sword and leaves, but Quen asked his father it is okay for him and asked to take it. As his father had no interest in it, he told to leave it. After that, brother Quen reluctantly manages to throw a couple of sharp words telling him to stop fooling around. As they leave, Hollow tells Kasumi that they were his father and brother Quen, and he was glad no one took the sword from him. Hollow goes to his room and brings something out of the kitchen for Kasumi to eat. She was outraged by such an act because she was a sword and could live without food. The boy was surprised that she did not eat food, but the girl changed her mind and told him that she could eat it in her human form. After eating it, she was surprised by the taste. This amuses the boy, and he laughs at her. This confused Kasumi, and she thought as if she had already spoken to someone like this. Noticing the strange face, Hollow wonders if everything is okay. Reflecting on it, she says her memory is very vague as if it has slowly faded. The boy holds her hand and takes the girl by the holding her hand up the stairs encouragingly, trusting that the memories will come sooner or later. He shows me his favorite place. The tower has a beautiful view and creates shared memories from that time. As time goes on and she spends time with Hollow, at the library she wondered why he still studied on his own when he had a private tutor, to which Hollow told that the adults don't want him to teach anything about the outside world. While being with him, she further asked him why he sewed his own clothes even as an aristocrat, to which he told he didn't get to have any assistance. At the practice she asked about Mrs. Sarah, if weren't it for her, he wouldn't have known anything about swordsmanship, to which Hollow agreed and said meeting her makes it all the more exciting. Then as Hollow sleeps, she thinks everyone in this house is cold towards Hollow. To think that he'd be treated like this just because he can't use magic. She promises him that everything will be alright and she will be his sword. Kasumi also falls asleep while thinking. The next day, Hollow started waking Kasumi up since it was early in the morning. Meanwhile, Kasumi was dreaming of the Hollow, which had grown larger than it had since he was a small boy the day before. But that hollow sound appeared like a dream vision, because Hollow met Kasumi. Exercise is done every morning as a daily routine. She taught him the ways of former skilled swordsmen, and the amazing power came from this sword. By using these techniques, memories, and experiences of Kasumi's proxy battles, it took a long time for Hollow to assert his position, continuing to learn how to use magic. Recently, Hollow was practicing with his sword in the shade of a tree. Mrs. Sarah just came up to him and told how fast time was flying because he would soon be 15. Today was their last magic lesson that Hollow was asked to watch out for. He was grateful to her. He thanked her for teaching him not only how to use the sword, but also all the magic in the world, and even how to fight magic with the sword. Suddenly, the wind blew around the tree, tearing off all the leaves and surrounding the two of them with a beautiful fall of leaves. Mrs. Sarah looked at Hollow and praised him. It was not easy for him to learn magic. He has worked hard for the last 10 years, and this is his latest lesson for him. Later she asked Hollow if he had decided what to do next. All the family members and Mrs. Sarah were seated at the grand dinner table and waited on by the servants. Mrs. Sarah said she hadn't seen Arlen or Quen together since a long time. Arlen responded that he had only been back for a month, and he finished school in chivalric order and is ready to enter royal service next autumn, while Quen claims to have topped his class in magic exams. It has not happened before in the history of the academy. Hollow's mind begins to be preoccupied by the thoughts. Arlen wonders why Hollow is not eating. Hollow would still rather talk seriously to his father about how he took all of his classes from Mrs. Sarah that day, and also adds that unlike his brothers who aspired to go to the Royal Palace Academy where their mother wants them, he wants to become an adventurer. This disconcerted everybody. Everyone is amazed by his decision. Quen, who screams this accusation at him and screamed an adventurer, someone from the Vermilia family, told him to stop fooling around and called him shameless. Moreover, Arlen disagrees with it too, as he thinks it is dangerous and impossible because Hollow can't be an adventurer without magic. The father is no less angry, hitting the table with his fist and shouting at his son as unforgivable. All that time, they have concealed such a failure from the world, and the reputation of the family will be much hurt if someone finds out about it from the parents' point of view. To which Hollow finds a simple solution by announcing that he won't be carrying the Vermilia family name. He is going to change his name. His father reminds him what the crest on his left hand means, adding no matter how hard he trains, he is incompetent. Hollow angrily approved, but it's like what his father said. Adding that he is going to make out of this body of his, Hollow stands up from the table and says nothing will change if he is still locked up in this mansion. After these words, his father gives his consent but sets him the condition that tomorrow he will have a duel with Quen, and he has to defeat him with the help of sword skills alone, and only then he will be allowed to leave home and become an adventurer or at least a beggar. Arlen doesn't like these words and tries to change his mind, but Quen grins happily. Hollow is satisfied at everything and leaves the dining room, making a promise to his father. At last he will be able to fight magic, and suddenly Kasumi greets him in the room and praises the speech. She is happy that finally Hollow will be out of this house, but Hollow has his doubts. If he loses, for all he knew, he had only practiced with her and it was always the swords. He never face-to-face fought magic, and the bigger problem is his very own brother, Quen, who is supposedly good at magic. Hollow felt a little down and wondered what if he could actually not even manage to stand against the rays. It will just mean that he is useless even with a sword. Kasumi interrupts his sad thoughts and indignantly reminds him of his promise during their first meeting. He said that he would pick her up and together they would go on an adventure. She encourages him, saying that she will prove his strength. She also told him to remember that she always is with him. Hollow thanked her for the support and apologized for her concerns. He added that he will never really be verbal about this stuff. He takes her by the hand, asking Kasumi to borrow her strength. At that instant, the girl is turning again into a sword. The day of the duel arrives, two facing each other, Quen with a stick and Hollow with a sword. Beside them, their father, brother Arlen, and Mrs. Sarah looking away. Mrs. Sarah moans that it's ridiculous to fight with swords beside magic. The elder son Arlen again tries to refuse to his father. But his father is not inclined. He wants to see at what level their strength is. In turn, Quen is full of desire to take revenge on his younger brother and is immersed in his own thoughts. He remembers how happy their family was while their mother was alive. Every day was filled with joy. Everyone was happy. Everyone was loved. From the very day that mother had died, the mansion never glimmered and was filled with a dark aura. Into that aura, Hollow's voice carried with him everything. Hollow became a ray of hope. Everybody said that he was the bearer of the greatest retention of magic power of all time. Quen also heard rumors that Hollow was supposed to take in all of his mother's magic power upon being born. It turns out he did not only take his mother away from him, but he did not even meet expectations and let everyone down. Quen insults Hollow, calling him a defective animal, and starts the fight with the release of a fireball. Hollow gets his sword ready as well. The fireball is a missile moving at a constant speed with a range up to 60 meters. He is right to control the range between him and Hollow without allowing him any closer by even a meter. After the casting of the spell, the minimum duration of the fireball is 0.8 seconds. The trajectory is based on the angle and wave of the magic wand. Hollow, on the other hand, is able to anticipate the direction where the wand will point, so he easily dodges the projectiles. Quen is shocked and cannot understand how his younger brother is able to move forward under the hail of his attack. Hollow slowly realizes that the sword's main weakness was its reach. He needs to get close to the attack, but as a magic user they need to control their path and take down the enemy at the beginning of the fight. Close combat is the last thing they want. Hollow runs forward with his full power and swings his sword. Quen builds a mud wall in front of him at the last moment. Quen was a magic double user that the world rarely sees. The Hollows didn't see him using earth magic much. Hollow was annoyed that his brother Quen used earth magic that he doesn't use very often, but standing on that mud wall, Hollow mocks his brother by saying that as expected from his brother Quen, and he further added that for a prodigy from a school of magic, Quen isn't all that charming. Quen became furious and threw a sand spear at Hollow with another spell in response to his younger brother Hollow. At that moment, Hollow falls a little far away from the wall. Quen stands behind the wall and declares that he cannot attack him because of the wall in between. Meanwhile, Quen uses his magic to shoot sand flying out of the wall towards the Hollow in different directions, and that the sand guns are about to hit. So Arlen tells Mrs. Sarah to stay back. Hollow abuses his brother, saying he is eager to attack his blind. Hollow gathers all the strength and power in his hands and runs forward towards the wall. But he doesn't care about the wall when he can just break through the wall. With one swing of his sword, Hollow slices through the wall in front of him. What happened shocks everyone. The sword almost flies. The wall was cut into small pieces. Quen steps back and he indulges in his memories of his father, giving Mrs. Sarah orders that Hollow not to be seen by the world. Quen, listening behind, was happy to hear that, thinking Hollow was an idiot and adding that this was finally going to be useless and all. Mrs. Sarah tells Hollow that he needs to get ready to do it himself, which Hollow thinks may have been at his father's order. Mrs. Sarah explains that he can do it to grow into a better young man. Hollow happily agreed. While Hollow was practicing well with Mrs. Sarah, to whom Mrs. Sarah was praising for his excellent performance with a sword. When Quen heard this, he became jealous because he admired Hollow's inability to use magic. His older brother Arlen also praised Hollow. As Hollow was being praised, Quen grew infuriated. He always thought he was better than him, more valuable. Towards reality, he doesn't understand how his younger brother surpasses him in every way. Then everything has vanished from his breath. Hollow points the sword at Quen's throat. Hollow remembers that it was first time they quarreled. Mrs. Sarah and Arlen run up to them. Their father was worried, and he saw the whole picture. As the father approached there, Hollow backed off his sword by telling his brother that it was so much fun. Quen was still lying on the floor in shock. After a while, Hollow was ready to go. Before leaving, he meets with Mrs. Sarah and his brother Arlen. Arlen begs him not to leave so soon and asks Hollow that he can come with him until they reach the imperial capital. Hollow replied that it was fine and he was on his own in the first place anyway. Hollow tells him to send letters as well. Mrs. Sarah asked him to visit if she is in the imperial capital. A satisfied look from his father from the balcony to Hollow. With a single sentence, Hollow says goodbye and leaves the house. Ever since his father put his brand on his hand, he was determined to challenge this world, and now with a sword in his hand, he will create his own path forward. Kasumi was so happy looking up at the bird. After leaving the mansion on the third day, the Hollow dressed in a cloak and heading towards the imperial capital of Ridwell with Kasumi. The Hollow was worried about Kasumi, pointing out that if she got tired of walking, suggesting that she take the form of a sword. But Kasumi begs not to worry and wants to walk next to him. In response, she asks if he's hot in that hood he is wearing. Hollow agreed, but he promised not to call it Vermilion, so it would be best not to reveal it until they left the lands of Vermilia. But Hollow pulls it off anyway. Because they are not so far from the building, he wonders if travelers around these places have a rare opportunity. He promised not to use the Vermilia name, so he is trying to keep it down. In the distance, Hollow spots some villagers and something has happened. He saw something happening to a carriage. He went to people and found out what the problem was. The man there in the cart replies that they are stuck in the drain. The girl with them says they could have used magic to lift out the cart, but she is a fire magician and the other girl has water magic. Their power is useless in these situations. Hollow thinks he will fix the problem and assumes he can help lift it. The girl excitedly asks if he has earth or wind magic, which the Hollow surprises by answering that he doesn't have any magic. But the joyful Hollow is confident in his strength. The girls just laugh at him and don't believe him about how he thinks he can actually lift it. Meanwhile, Kasumi angrily states that Hollow can do anything, don't judge him by not even trying, and he can definitely do it. Hollow offers to show them. The man told Hollow that they hope to get a nice reward for getting rid of all this stuff. He lifts in on the 3 count, pulls the cart out of the drain and raises it. The girls and the man left in shock. Hollow was glad he was able to pick it out. Kasumi warmly complimented Hollow on his work. The man thanked Hollow for his help. The man began to discuss with the Hollow that he didn't think he could actually lift it. He couldn't have done it without everyone's help. The man allows Hollow and Kasumi to go with them. Hollow thanked them for letting him ride with them. The man in the carriage wonders why they are going to Ridwell. Hollow says he lives alone, so he decided to become an adventurer. They learn from the man that girls are adventurers too, and now they are transporting cargo. One girl with short hair says her name is Karen and the other introduces herself as Shan. They have just acquired Azure class adventurers. Kasumi is shocked and asks what's that. She explained by pointing to an Azure badge with a wolf picture on it saying it is an adventurer tag. The Azure class comes within an Azure tag. Adventurers differentiate each other with these colors. There are 8 classes in total. It goes in order of white, red, azure, purple, rainbow silver, gold, and platinum. It seems like a lot, but there aren't really many adventurers above rainbow class. Azure class is around the middle of the bunch. Hollow celebrates with them and asks Shine again about her water magic. It was the first time Hollow had encountered one since he had not met any water magician yet. Shine is shocked and says that her magic can be very strong, but she can't control it properly, so she didn't try to pull the card out. Karen explains that they are experts in martial magic, and alongside Hollow, they were a really big help, and was really thankful of him. Hollow starts talking to them about the basics, but fire and water are well used by many in combat, but he thinks they're really good all-rounders for defense and support equipment. He also believes that variety from other sources is really interesting. There's a magical light coming from the air that he thinks is really cool. Kasumi scolds him, noting that he still doesn't know anything about magic. Karen is surprised that even though he can't use magic, he likes it. Cheyenne shouts at her, offering to put himself in the guy's place. Hollow assures them that there is nothing to worry about. Since his body couldn't withstand the magic, he has to become an adventurer to learn how to use the sword properly. Karen turns serious and asks if he kill anyone. On his exploration, he not only encounters monsters but may eventually have to fight humans as well. There is nothing he can do without determination. She also tries not to look down on him because he is young, but he needs to find something else. Suddenly the carriage started to shake. Karen shouted, asking what was going on outside. They are attacked by bandits and Karen's father is grabbed. The girls run to save him and Cheyenne asks Hollow to stay there and hide somewhere, but Hollow wants to take a look at it. The bandits say leave the cart and no one will get hurt. Hollow looks at them and counts 13 in response. Karen insists on rescuing her father, who is mocked by the bandits. Bandits seen towards the girls, thinking how beautiful the girls are. Shen and Karen stand shoulder to shoulder and Xian mentioned that it was always like that, and those bandits say the same thing. Karen added to let's show them what they were made of. Then just the bandits gets ready to use the magic to attack them. As the battle of the magic started, Hollow was amazed and thinks that it was a chance storm, and that was his first time seeing a battle between many magic users at once. He was amazed at their cooperation, showing that the bandits are strong. Kasumi tells Hollow that those 2 girls weren't seems like enough, so she asked Hollow to let's go to help them, but Hollow replied to wait for a while. Karen and Cheyenne use their magic to confidently deal with the bandits. Both girls have proven to be very strong. They fight off with the bandits one by one. As Hollow looks at them, he thinks about Karen's last words in the cart if he ever hurt anyone. All this time he was just competing with other people. But unlike the 2 girls, he was not prepared. Suddenly one of the bandits freezes Xian. Then the boss of the bandits come there by asking to quite the affinity they haven't, and as they gets bored, so he will play with girls a bit. Girls gets that it was the Oz Quartz and there was a bounty of a class on him. Oz Quartz tell that he didn't hate feisty women. Oz Quartz reflects Karen's flaming pillar with the freezing spell. He admires her, noting that Karen won't let go of her wand until she dies. Confused, she tries to point the small flame at the enemy, but is blocked by ice bullets. The bandit taunts him for being too fast, but they're a few steps ahead and so can't get out. At that point, the bandit strikes with a thunderstorm at her. The bandit's leader brags that if he hits her again with that thunder, she'll be immobilized forever. Kasumi yells at Hollow and tells him to make a decision. Oz Quartz grabs Karen's face and tells her how to have fun with her. Kazumi yells at Hollow that for what thing they were there. The bandit gets distracted and throws the girl aside. Hollow holds a sword in his hand. Kasumi helped him decide if he was hurting someone or not. The only thing that matters is why he decided he could master the sword. Karen begs Hollow not to fool him because he cannot defeat those bandits. Xian asks Hollow to ran away from there. The bandit asks questions because it's a stupid thing called Hollow and ordered to kill him. Hollow flies high into the air and slams into the bodies of his opponents. The bandits scream that he is in the sky, and the guy flying over them activates a wind front and a shockwave. The men don't understand what he is doing. They scream, but Hollow keeps defeating the bandits one by one. The blonde robber activates ice projection and tries to attack the Hollow, but the Hollow keeps moving towards him with his full power. Oz Quartz doesn't understand what he is trying to do with his sword. He cannot believe that anyone can respond to such an attack. Hollow finishes off the rest of the bandits and sees the bearded man Oz Quartz, who was the leader of that bandits, having a curved wand in his hand and scared of Hollow. Suddenly he uses thunder magic and Hollow runs towards the Oz Quartz with all his strength and power. Lots of sparks flying around. Cheyenne closes her eyes and Karen screams Hollow's name loudly. Hollow jumps up with full force and is about to hit his opponent. The man screams and asks how he can still walk. After that he starts slashing his sword towards two Oz Quartz that hurt him. The standing Oz Quartz falls to the ground and the Hollow lands gracefully, and finally all the opponents were defeated. The driver of the cart bursts into tears and embraces Hollow. They tie up the bandit leader and Hollow tells that bandit leader that he already treated him, so tell him to stay tight until they reach Ridwell, and in general bandits shouldn't forget to shower either because it stinks. Cheyenne says she should have just left him alone. Karen agrees, who would have thought that they would have injured the bandits to the point that they would need treatment. If there were other adventurers here, they would remember it for the rest of their lives, and she clutches her head. Cheyenne tells Hollow to be more careful next time. Hollow agrees, saying that as they said he has no experience yet, but has decided to use his sword. Hollow and Kasumi looked at each other, and Kasumi told the girls not to worry about them. The man who was driving the cart calls the guys and informs them that they will be at Ridwell soon. There is a beautiful view of the river and mountains from the front of the carriage. In the city surrounded by a fortress, and in the middle they can see a large castle. Hollow watches from the carriage and marvels at the size of the city. Kasumi asks Hollow to take a look. In the city, Hollow sees a lot of things he has never seen before, a lot of people living together and a lot of tradesmen. Karen asks Hollow not to be embarrassed and to go to guild base with them. These guys will be sent in, so Cheyenne asks if they want to join the guild. When they reach a guild, an employee over there reaches for the magic circle and says that the detention has been confirmed. The employee over there, who was a girl, tells them that the leader of Bandit Oz Quartz who have the A-class bounty into the hands of the guild. To think he was taken alive, as he expects from Mrs. Karen and Mrs. Cheyenne. Karen refuses and tries to explain to her about the situation, but the employee asks permission to give them an award. The employee provides them compensation for the capture of A-class criminals is 60 gold coins. Cheyenne offers to share 60% with them and the other 40% with Hollow. Karen screams and asks what she's saying. All this money belongs to the Hollow, but to get it you need to be an adventurer. There are strict rules that they must follow, to which Karen immediately replied no and offered Hollow the entire package as his compensation. Hollow asks if they are sure about this. Hollow wonders that this is the first money he ever made on his own. Karen forgot to say thanks for helping them. If it hadn't been for there, they might have died. Hollow clutches his head as he feels shy. Karen asks what the matter is and if Hollow was embarrassed. The employee at the counter was shocked and asked why the girls gave that prize to the boy. Karen crumbles out her Hollow's hair and explains that it's all because he defeated all the Oz bandits. After listening to this, everyone in the guild starts staring at Hollow and starts whispering. The employee notifies to a girl that her application for the adventure test has been accepted. She mentioned that it was so lively there. The employee mentions that the Oz bandits have been caught and asks if the girl also wants to be an adventurer and do such a thing. She denied it because she was a demon hunter. Hollow and Kasumi go to the town, and Kasumi says to Hollow that they were so happy to meet Karen and others on their journey. Hollow adds that he has also applied to join the ranks of adventurers in the guild. The employee at the guild asked him if he wanted to be an adventurer too, because in that case he would have to sign up immediately, as today was the last day of registration. Cheyenne explained that they were just at the perfect time and told Hollow to come over and get started for the registration process. Karen promised to take them to a great place to relax his head just for her sake. In addition, they will be thankful that everything went well. The adventure test involves camping outdoors for 3 days. Karen offered to go through the dungeon to buy the equipment they needed for the exam. Kasumi suggests Hollow go into the store, and they go to the counter of that store. Hollow grabs Kasumi's shoulder and asks her to be careful. Kasumi is about to hit the weird girl and Kasumi apologizes, but the weird girl explains that she doesn't need to apologize, and she is also inconsiderate and apologetic. That strange girl that Hollow saw in front of the desk in the guild when he asked for an apology. Hollow thinks if the strange girl will participate in the examination as well. Kasumi tells Hollow to move on. He agrees, but the strange girl they meet tells Hollow to wait. She held out a card and asked if this was of them. Hollow sweats and screams that the card is of him. He almost lost it. He thinks about how he is being so careless and is very grateful to that stranger girl. The girl asks Hollow about his age, to which Hollow replies that he is 14 years old. The strange girl reacts a bit angrily, whether he knows, because in that state the entrance exam is an order of magnitude higher than anywhere else. Hollow asks what she meant. The stranger girl breathlessly says previous generations of adventurers of this country have left behind many historical legends over the time. Consequently, there is a high demand for experienced adventurers compared to others in this country. Being famous in this country is very important, and they pay a higher salary than anyone else in this country. As a result, the test there is more difficult than in other countries. He could die if the boy really wants to pass it. The strange girl advises him to pull out if he really wants to pass the exam. The strange girl hands Hollow his card and explains she was just looking out for the younger ones, and the strange girl leaves from there. Meanwhile, Kasumi over there teasingly repeats her words as she is looking at the younger ones, and she says so by describing herself in the presence of a 600-year-old. Hollow also comments that Karen said the same thing but asks if he really sounds so weak. Kasumi screams over the Hollow in his head, everything is fine, and she knows how wonderful he is. Kasumi and Hollow keep going. Soon they bought everything they wanted for the exam. The day of the exam arrives. Hollow stands with his sword in his hand, and Kasumi tells that it is going to be very exciting. Candidates are asked to go one step further. All candidates enter the dungeon through a single door and climb the stairs leading down to them. There were several giant trees, and they were welcomed into the underground dungeon of the guild base at the bottom of the abyss forest. The employee girl over there told all the candidates that the exam will go on for the last 3 days. The employee girl starts asking for the numbers provided to the candidates as 1, 8, 13, 2, 3, 9, and tells them to step forward. Hollow wonders if they are making up groups with other candidates. It looks like number 16 was Hollow, who was allocated to go into the Ignice team. Now they will announce a task for each team. Hollow notices that the stranger girl that he met on the street was in his team, and the employee over there explains that the assignment of Team Terra Squad is looking for scarlet crystals. The Aqua Squad goes in search of the Forest Keeper's binoculars. The Ventus Squad collects the eggs of the deep crab, and the Ignice Squad will gather beast mushrooms. A man in the cap told them that's all. Furthermore, they will not answer any of their questions regarding the exam. All the candidates in the dungeon opened their mouths in surprise and left shocked. A guy who was a candidate in the dungeon asks to wait and start asking questions regarding the exam rules, regarding the requirements to pass the exam, if they have any time limit on whether participants get credit as soon as the team gets what they need. The employee explains that they can't answer their questions. Hollow was all clear, and they checked how they thought and acted. He believes that the exam will begin soon. He thinks the trial will start soon. Another man in the Hollow team with a large backpack on his back approaches the Hollow and the stranger girl and invites them to introduce themselves. The man who identified himself as Woodwan. He says they will work together as a team and give their best. Hollow introduces himself and says he is happy to meet the man. A male voice asks loudly if they have a team. A dark-haired stranger with a scarf introduces himself and explains that he thinks once they join the same team they will be rivals, but despite this he will show up anyway, and he tells them to remember his name, Kai. He starts explaining the meaning of his name as the Wind God. Hollow asks about the Wind God. The strange girl asks if he named himself as Wind God is too lame. Kai screams asking if that is too lame and promises to kill the girl. Woodone calms Kai down and yells that he will be going to remember her. The strange girl introduces herself as Cecilia and tells her to trust that she is not interested in joining the team. Woodone tells them to listen to him. It's embarrassing to admit him, but it is his 4th time taking this exam. This fact alone already suggests that this is not a walk in the park for them. Kai begs him not to tell him this way, but the man goes on to explain that there is an advantage that this is his 4th time in this dungeon, so he asks if there could be a more reliable source of information. Everyone in the team will be benefited. Hollow knows it won't be easy for them. Cecilia apologizes, but explains that she would still be better off alone, but that she has information ready to buy. Kai again screams that she is not strong enough. He plays by his own rules when sticking with average toes like them. Woodone misunderstands them, Hollow thinking that every other team is figuring out how to deal with the other teams, but meanwhile, his group is right here figuring out if he even needs one. Hollow wonders if there could be 2 foresters' binoculars hiding in that dungeon at the same time. Hollow calls Woodone and says he thinks he can go with him. Hollow told them that they now did not know how many monstrous mushrooms they would need and what condition they would have to go through. And there was a risk that others will try to steal the findings, and it was important for them to work together as a team, but the most important thing now was how they got along with others. He doesn't mind facing Wood One, but Kai interrupts Hollow with a shout and says that being in the same team is, and always will be synonymous with being a rival. Hollow shrugs at Wood One's pain. They all decide to separate now. Wood One asks Hollow to be careful and wishes them well. Hollow waves his hand towards Wood One, wishing him luck too and thanking him. As Hollow part from Wood One, Kazumi takes the human form, and they both were having the lamps in their hand. They were currently in the plant-based cave, and he mentioned that it was his first time in there, and those surrounding things looks like the trees. Kazumi mentioned that it also gets very scary at night. Kasumi asks how the mushrooms survive in a dungeon with absolutely no sunlight. There are bats and other insects there. Kasumi seems likely to have places that are somehow connected to the outside world. Hollow mentions that this entire dungeon is called the Forest of the Abyss, and the name itself suggests that it may be connected to a forest in the background. Kasumi begins to understand everything. In this case, the mushrooms then grow closer to the environment of the outside world. Hollow said to look around the sunlight now. Kasumi and Hollow continue to support each other. Hollow investigates and notices a few wild animals. Kasumi sits on the ground and talks about being tired. She wonders if they are just wandering around aimlessly. Hollow admits it's exhausting, and the sun was also almost down. He thinks that's enough for today and suggests they should head back to camp, to which Kasumi agrees. Kasumi and Hollow are standing in front of a lake, on the other side of which there are also future adventurers. Hollow sits down and says there are more lanterns than before at night. Apparently it seems that people love to camp there more. Kasumi looks around and says there is a water fountain nearby that was very useful. Kasumi bends over to the water and fills the pitcher. Suddenly, on the other hand, Cecilia yells for Kasumi to look and be careful. Kasumi lifts her head, and a large-toothed fish flies out of the water, slamming into her. Cecilia attacks the monster like a fish with her wand, and Hollow pulls Kasumi out of the water. Cecilia holds a magic wand in her hand as swirls of water fly towards her. Cecilia asks Kasumi and Hollow if they are okay, to which Kasumi replies that she is fine and thanking her for the help. Hollow cheerfully says that it was cool that Cecilia sent that big fish flying like a water ball. Cecilia turns away and replies it's nothing much, just a few basics. Hollow asks Cecilia if she wants to help her with dinner as he points towards the dead fish and explains that this guy will be the main course. Cecilia asks if they want to eat that big fish, but how. Hollow and Kazumi looked at each other and then makes the fire. Cecilia asks didn't they give up on teamwork. While eating some food, Kasumi reiterates not to worry about such little stuff. Cecilia reminds the guys that they said they wanted to explore the dungeon. Hollow confirms that he and Kasumi applied for the exam together so that they could go on assignment together. Hollow starts thinking that Kasumi didn't actually serve anything if it turns out he may be disqualified. Cecilia says that she has no troubles with teamwork unless she does not find the act of working collectively being coercious. Hollow reminds Cecilia that she prefers to work alone and that she can understand people at the first glance. Hollow adds that it was so kind of her. She helped Kasumi and Hollow out today too. Hollow even told Cecilia that she was a little cruel with him the first time they met, but she was just concerned about Hollow. Kasumi tells a friend that he is so considerate. Cecilia drops her fish and tells them that she had a younger brother. He could be the same age as Hollow now. Be that as it may, she does not think it is important. Hollow assumed that Cecilia's younger brother is no longer. Cecilia says that when she was 10 years old, it happened except Cecilia. Her whole family was killed by demons. Kasumi and Hollow start listening to Cecilia very carefully. Cecilia further told that as she was all alone, she was taken to an orphanage, and that orphan was located deep in the woods. She lost her family at a tender age, and thus socialization was hard for her. Though she lived in an orphanage, she was all alone, and finally she became self-dependent. Cecilia decided to hunt demons. She will kill every demon that dares to kill anyone. She does not want other people to go through what she has gone through, and that is why she doesn't care about fame or money. Maybe she just wants to help people, Kasumi thinks. Cecilia tells that it's true, and that is why she wants to become an adventurer. The Hollow falls silent, and they all rise their heads towards the sky. They see the night stones and trees glow. Hollow stands up and wonders, of course. Each of them has their reasons for becoming adventurers. But what about Hollow's reason to become an adventurer? He is just looking for something he can do. After some time, Hollow woke up and saw that Cecilia was standing far alone. Hollow greeted her and asked if she knew what time it was. Cecilia responded that the light of the night stones gradually flickered. She thinks it is going to be morning soon. Hollow stood up, but Kasumi held him by the waist and asked him to sleep more. Cecilia assumes that Hollow is in what kind of relationship with her. Hollow explains that Kasumi cannot sleep unless she hugs something that lets her relax. Hollow tries to push Kasumi away from him and asks if Cecilia is leaving already. Cecilia confirms that she is leaving, and she thanks them for helping her out and apologizes if she has been a bother. She also asks to thank Kasumi. Hollow agrees and asks Cecilia to take care of herself. Soon Kasumi wakes up and asks if Cecilia has already left. Hollow hands her hot water and tells her that they need to try hard today. They're sure that they will definitely find those mushrooms today. Hollow notices the screams of a voice calling someone and asking them to pull themselves together. Hollow jumps up and realizes that it is Cecilia's voice. She might be in trouble. Hollow and Kasumi run with lamps in their hands towards Cecilia. Hollow shout and ask her what happened. Cecilia sits on the ground, slapping the cheeks of dark-haired guy, Kai, who was one of their teammates. She screams and asks him to wake up. Kai was lying on the ground. Now Hollow was surprised to see Kai lying on the ground and asked what had happened to the guy. Cecilia explains these are demons, and there are a few scars on his body that were left by a demon. His whole body is cut up. There is an angry demon hiding somewhere close by in this dungeon. Cecilia screams Kai's name. The man begins to sigh. Hollow and Cecilia were shocked to see his position. Hollow tells that they had to stop the blood, so he asks Cecilia to hurry and use the emergency flare to call in some higher-ups from the guild. And he asks Kasumi to go and bring his stuffs. Agreeing, Kasumi leave from there. The employee from the guild arrived. Kai was put on a stretcher, and the employed member of the guild praised them for having called them first. The member further asks them not to forget to protect themselves during the exam. They carried Kai away on a stretcher. Hollow said in a state of senselessness that they are lucky that the demons did not appear against them. They reached a place and noticed a heap of bones where the demon was dining. Cecilia decides that they should vacate out of this place in any case. She gets into a scream and asks Kasumi and Hollow if they do not sense any kind of danger. They wouldn't last very long, adjourned in a demon's nest. They decided to walk in a team from that time. Kasumi has an empty scabbard and is unarmed by this. Hollow says they should get in there first and have a look. Cecilia thinks they should have to go on the hills, and she agrees with them. Soon the guys are roaming in the woods and illuminating with the nearby lamps in different directions. Hollow has found something, and Kasumi assumes that they may be the traces of a demon. Hollow explains these as Kai's bag. They don't understand what it was doing there. Hollow explains further that in the first it was unnoticeable because the bag was blocking the view, but when Hollow was treating Kai's wounds and other injuries caught his eyes, and some of the injuries that weren't made by demon but someone else left them. It looked like he got them by falling off the cliffs, so Hollow immediately started wondering if there was something above on the cliff. When Kasumi thinks as an attacker passerby that way, Hollow started thinking when he was treating Kai from the back of his body. That time he couldn't understand what it was. Suddenly, Cecilia calls Hollow and asks to come here. She points down and shows them there are tracks of some kind. Hollow saying them as she is correct, and that looks like the base of some kind of plant. Kasumi asks if it's in a place like this. Cecilia presents to the guys the lighting system and tells them that the lantern serves as a light source that helps plants to grow and take shape. So the rock has become moist and has started growing mushrooms. That is a phenomenon that only happens in caves that have special monsters in it. Hollow and Cecilia excitedly say that these are the footprints of monsters. Hollow gives Cecilia a high five and says she's right. Surely they are not the only ones here. Meanwhile, the girl offers to keep searching. Hollow thinks that these mushrooms have already been picked and only recently. He assumes that Kai picked them. But in the bag of Kai, he did not find anything. Cecilia calls Kasumi to look at this place. Kasumi says a few more tracks of monsters. She adds that they are so deep that it is with a thick layer of wool. Hollow decides perfect, just enough for two. Cecilia, Hollow, and Kasumi sit down under the tree, and Hollow suggests returning to the camp. They are near the demon's nest, and it is not worth wasting too much time there. Cecilia says that she is going to get some water and won't take much time. Hollow and Kasumi say that they possibly have a waterfront. Kasumi makes up her mind and says that she will go with Cecilia now because she really needs to go to the toilet. Cecilia explains that she is only going to get some water and asks Hollow not to get any kind of wrong idea for her. Alone in the forest somewhere, Hollow is left all to his own devices. He saw a male body far away. Suddenly, Wood One shouts out Hollow's name and says that thank God that he's fine. Wood One is holding his hand, and Hollow thinks that he is hurt. Wood One insists Hollow not to worry about him because they need to get out of here. Hollow saw the wounds on Wood One's body and asked if something was wrong with him and Kai. Wood One starts to explain that he did not see Kai for a while as they missed each other. Further, Wood One added that other than that, they're in the demon's nest and need to get out of here right away. Hollow realizes that these were not the wounds a demon is going to leave, but by wind magic. Wood One asks what he's saying because he hasn't even seen them. Wood One explains that he is mistaken. That's all. In fact, he inflicted these wounds on himself. Wood One just had quietly listened. This wouldn't have happened. Wood One pulls his wand out and grabs Hollow's hand. He yells and asks if he has any monster tracks, ordering him to be given him. Hollow questions if he would want to attack a person who has a wand unarmed. Wood One speaks of being such an idiot, which is why he targeted him. At that moment, Kasumi and Cecilia appear nearby. The girls scream and ask what Wood One is doing. Kasumi shouted to release the Hollow's hand, and Cecilia asked what was happening, and asked Wood One to put his wand away. Hollow sadly told that he was the one who pushed Kai off the cliff. There were traces of wind magic on Kai's body at its back. They wouldn't be there if he was fighting a demon. Wood One starts to sweat and explains that he didn't want it to happen like this. He just wanted to negotiate with them. And so he begged Kai to design to sell him a few mushrooms. So first he offers him 5 gold coins, then 10 golden coins. Kai disagreed and told Wood One that this was the 4th time Wood One had not passed this exam. He cannot even work hard enough next time. Some adventurers aspire to go on adventures. Kai declined Wood One to not sell him anything. Further, Kai added that if Wood One decided to take the easy way, then it's better for him to go home. Wood One told him more after Kai's words. He shouted to Kai that this was indeed his goal, but he had to be an adventurer for this. Kai called Wood One pitiful person and told him to stop asking for mushroom. Kai angrily then hit Wood One in the head. Kai stopped Wood One and told him to stop trying. Wood One turned to his bag and realized he should have done this from the beginning. After that, he pointed his wand at Kai's back and yelled at Kai for insulting him, so he sent him flying. He was just innocent enough to fall into a demon-infested cave. Mushroom fell out of his bag and he picked it up. Wood One summed up the whole situation between him and Kai. He is a mage of war between them. Wood One asks what, since this is a test and not some sort of mushroom or vegetable gathering contest. He also shouted that it was wrong. Cecilia asks if she knew Kai fell into the monster nest. Wood One replies that of course if he doesn't let his tongue out. If he knew about everything, he just had to give them to him. Wood One showed them the mushroom he took from Kai and told them that Kai's mushroom was fake anyway, but they got the real ones. Hollow saw that scale and asked if it was fake. Cecilia drops the lamp, reaches down and asks if this is all there is, just about the mushroom. Cecilia raises her magic wand and starts using magic so stupidly, causing such pain. Kasumi and Hollow exchange glances. At that moment, Cecilia directs a water cage towards Wood One through her magic wand. Kasumi calls Cecilia and asks what she is doing. Cecilia orders Kasumi to go back, but realizes that the Hollow can be hurt as well, as Hollow was near Wood One. At that moment, Wood One jumps up, and Cecilia screams not to let him. She orders the water cage to catch him. As Wood One flies off, he explains with a shout that he will cut her off and activates his magic wand. Wood One cuts through the water in front of him and aims to hit them and summons a wreck. Hollow dodges his attack, and Cecilia tells Wooden Tot he won't get away. He strangles and traps his opponent in a net of water as he begins choking him. Wood One tries to catch his breath, and Cecilia screams that she won't forgive him for saying that Wood One was someone who threw the man into the hands of demons. Hollow realizes what's going on and yells at Cecilia that she's had enough. Still, Cecilia didn't stop and explained that people like him don't deserve forgiveness. Hollow further tries to stop her by saying that she will kill him, and this is too much. Cecilia doesn't stop screaming and explains that he put the injured man in danger. Meanwhile, Hollow falls on the ground, so Kasumi screams his name. Hollow tells Kasumi to stay because as she is now a human, she is weak. Kasumi tries to refuse, and Cecilia orders the Hollow to stand out from her way because he could get hurt. Hollow doesn't move, and Cecilia screams for trouble on him. She asks him to step back. Suddenly, Kasumi sees this happening again, a strange glow in the marks at the Hollow's left hand palm. Hollow reaches out to Cecilia and says she can't kill him. Hollow approached Cecilia. He picks up his wand and tells her to remember, Cecilia wondering if her magic is starting to fade and she doesn't understand what is going on. Hollow takes the wand and asks what she promised to herself. Hollow takes the magic wand from Cecilia and reminds her that she said she wanted to be an adventurer to save people. Cecilia starts getting blush and Hollow smiles and asks if that's not right. Wood One coughs hard and falls to the ground. He tries to reach out his wand, but Hollow tells him not to try. He and his magic are no match for Cecilia, and adding that also Kai is still alive. If he thinks there is no repentance, he is mistaken. At that moment, suddenly Hollow approaches him slowly and shouts to Wooden that something is behind him. Suddenly, a six-eyed wolf appeared behind Wood One. He is coughing and frightened. He glanced back menacingly, but suddenly the six-eyed wolf opened his mouth. Wood One rushes over and screams for help. Meanwhile, Hollow yells for Kasumi to hurry up, and Kasumi holds out Hollow's hand, indicating that she is here. Hollow screams to be saved and calls Kasumi. Cecilia doesn't understand and is surprised because Kasumi has turned into a sword after holding Hollow's hand. Hollow runs up to the monster and slashes it in the head with his sword. The water made the ground slippery. Hollow deflected the monster's punches but pulled back. With a shout, he explains that he can't fight well on his feet. Hollow tells Wood One to get up because there is no time to lose his mind. Cecilia looks through clenched teeth. The six-eyed wolf again returns to Wood One. Cecilia tells Hollow not to approach Wood One. The monster focuses on him. She will surround himself with water to protect him. Hollow escapes and asks Cecilia to take care of him. Cecilia sees this as her responsibility. She activates the magic and traps Wood One in the water. Hollow jumps up and is about to strike from above. He shouts to the wolf that he has been caught and asks to receive, after which he cuts off the monster's head with one blow. Hollow looks at Cecilia and Wood One. A girl jumps up with a wand in her birth hands and shouts that they won. They killed the monster. Kasumi tells Cecilia not to forget to take her with them. Cecilia remembers and tells Kasumi they did. At this point, the Hollow realizes that there is something behind the monster, and at this point Cecilia asks Kasumi who she is and what happened to her. Kasumi doesn't understand what she is talking about. Hollow grabs a mushroom from the monster's back. After a while, one of the guild employees has mushrooms in their hands and excitedly points out that this is what they needed. Really delicious, horribly messy mushrooms. Hollow thinks it's a mushroom that grew on the monster's back. He doesn't like to eat that mushroom, which grows on the back of a monster. The woman on the counter says what a shame she would have thought it would be. Wood One has already given the test 4 times, but this was also their mistake in allowing them to participate in the exam with combat teams. Unfortunately, he can't be an adventurer. He betrayed the ideals of the adventurers anyway. The employee hands Hollow and Cecilia their triangular badges of adventurers. Having this will act as a pass for them and pay for many things. Cecilia spots a white wolf on the badge which the employee provided them. The employee of the guild explains that with hard work they can change the color of their badge. Further, she asks to accept her congratulations because from that moment they become adventurers. Hollow exclaimed in excitement as he ran outside and took the first step to become an adventurer. After some time, Hollow became hungry and says he will go somewhere, and with that Hollow asks Cecilia to join him. But Cecilia was so silent, thinking deeply. Hollow asks what the matter is, and Cecilia asks Hollow to be careful, and from next time don't let the other people know that Kasumi has turned into a sword. She also added that she had heard terrifying rumors of a bloodthirsty killer lying in wait for a magic sword. The corroded magic knight. Cecilia further told him that if his sword touches, the person's body will begin to melt. She had always thought magic swords were a fancy fairy tale, but she really never thought they existed and could be transformed into humans. She realized something quite possibly. Kasumi is one of the rarest things ever existed. The next scene unfolds as a tiny rabbit flying over the city. Hollow swings his sword and puts the little horned monsters in one pile. An old man of the town approaches Hollow from behind and informs him that ever since the outbreak of the Almerage rabbits they thought they had been for. But to think that Hollow accomplished so much in just one day. Hollow thinks vegetables should be planted that prevent such harm to animals. The old man signs the letter and the man informs them that he is very nice to them. Hollow sees a mountain of Almerage rabbits and wants them to enjoy the cleaning. The 5th day is an adventure. Being a white rank, the boy focuses exclusively on daily tasks. Hollow pulls the rabbit cart that Kasumi is seated on. Kasumi says it's a bit like sword fighting training. The types of requests are divided by classes. The first layer, the white layer, is capable of only minor tasks, for example manual labor. In fact, all that remains is for them to climb the ladder of classes and for them to gain confidence through small accomplishments. The employee at the counter's words that the mission is completed and confirmed, so she gives them their reward. Additionally, she added that Hollow must be working harder these days and is almost in the red class. Hollow asks if it's true. He was very happy and told Kasumi that they will have the same spirit and take on more tasks. The girl also says that as soon as they get the announcement, they will buy sweats and celebrate it. The employee on the counter smiles and says it's so nice to see them moved. The stranger places a package on the counter and asks Karuka if she can help him. The employee agrees, and the man finds out that this boy comes here often. The employee asks if he's talking about Hollow. The boy became the youngest adventurer in guild history. Although he may be young, he was actually quite mature and charming to tell the truth. The man thought curiously. This time Cecilia comes up to the Hollow and asks how they are doing. Hollow replies that there is nothing else. They keep accumulating accomplishments. Cecilia thought so and added that she wanted to thank him for introducing her to Karen and friends. She was taught a lot about running for business, and also Karen promised to answer all her questions. Soon they will reach the red class. Cecilia is open to doing the job she wants to do. Hollow asks if she is talking about these quests she is interested in choosing. Extermination of the Ore-Sea hideout to the west of Ridwell, and the extermination of the general Ore-Sea after the achievement of the exterminating 50% of the ORCs there. Cecilia confirms, and afterwards she added that they need to be adventurers 4 from red class and above have completed. Hollow asks if she wants to join Karen and Shan. He believes Cecilia is best suited for the role of supporting the team. If she works with them, they will have a balanced team. Cecilia insists that she must not talk about this, but that she will think about it if invited. Kasumi says she doesn't seem to like the idea. Cecilia yells that it's all Hollow's fault and asks the guy if he thought about teaming up with someone. Hollow explains that he can't use magic. He thinks no one wants to take him where Kasumi starts screaming and explains that his sword skills are no worse than magic. They are strong and useful in front of them. Kasumi even says she tells him the same thing. Cecilia asks Hollow not to underestimate your importance. Hollow raises his hand and apologizes. He says there are rumors that another magic sword hunter has popped up recently. Cecilia seems to have heard the same rumors and witnessed it too. He also learned that she was a magician who used various strange spells. She continues to hurt, and his body slowly begins to deteriorate until it is completely nothing. Hollow asks if it's not Magic Knight rotting since they don't seem to know what they're doing, but they're paying attention anyway. Hollow tells Kasumi that this applies to Kasumi as well and kindly acts with a sense of risk. Kasumi tells them not to worry about her because it would never occur to anyone that such a beauty could turn into one, and immediately Hollow and Cecilia put their hand on Kasumi's face and ask her to calm down. Cecilia explains that it's not about her. Kasumi blushes and smiles and scratches the back of her head. Outside, Hollow points to Cecilia and says he's glad to see her. He begs Cecilia not to disappear. Hollow asks Kasumi if they are going back to work. Kasumi agrees and calls him sir. After that they go deeper into the forest. Hollow fights the wind and gathers vegetables and fruits. Then he cleanses the city of dust and demons. The guild staff gives the guy a new badge and loudly congratulates him on being promoted to the red class. The youngest adventurer who reached the red rank, and even in such a short time the legend of Hollow has begun. Kasumi throws himself on his Hollow's back and suggests celebrating out loud. Hollow says she's overreacting, but thanks to her. He suggests Kasumi to watch the red class event. The girl responds by asking if he is more excited about the opportunity to do new projects instead of celebrating. A man pressing against the wall in front of him cuts off the Hollow's path. Hollow stops, but the man puts his foot in front of him and asks to listen to him. A blonde stranger girl runs up to the man and hits him as she starts to get angry. The girl hits the guy on his head. She yells at the man for being angry on Hollow and calling that guy an idiot, but she swears he was a very good person. The other man explained that they did not want to intimidate him. They just wanted to talk to Hollow. The man asked what the hell happened because he tried to greet him. The girl angrily tells the man, calls him an idiot, and explains that he argues with whoever he meets. Meanwhile, another man kneels down in front of the Hollow and tells him not to be afraid and asks him if he wants candy. Hollow was scared and refused by saying thank him and told him he was fine. Kasumi comes near Hollow's shoulder and then Hollow asks if they want to ask anything. A strange man said and offered to join their team with a shout. The other guy in the group asks how he invited him. Hollow is surprised, and soon the guys are standing outside on the street, and the blonde girl from the other team asks permission to introduce herself. Her name is Shia White. She uses wind magic and protects the rear and was also responsible for the treatment. The man with earrings in his ears introduces himself as a Baron and is an expert in research and uses earth magic. Girl Shia pointed to the other guy and called him a fool. The man with the blonde bangs introduces himself as Rise Ignold. He does fire-type magic and his specialty is kamikaze attacks, but even here he is somewhat of a leader. They are all red-class adventurers. Hollow introduces himself to all of them and explains that he is a swordsman. With this, he introduces Kasumi, as if she's not adventurous, but immediately Kasumi interrupts and hugs Hollow from behind and exclaims that she was her partner. Riz assumes she was a babysitter, but Kasumi screams again and explains she is partner. The group leader says it doesn't matter, that they had no reason to invite him. They want to work to destroy the orcs in Ridwell Forest to the west. If they win, they will stand out in the Azure category. Hollow reminds him that this mission requires at least 4 red rank adventurers. Riz explains that it takes a while to catch up. Hollow asks why, because he believes someone else will join the guild. Riz replied because they like him. Shia told him that this meant that someone who worked hard in the guild would be identified immediately. Hollow performed several tasks each day, and the guild workers seemed to enjoy him and his work. Riz says that he looked after him for 2 days. They decided he could be counted among their team. That is why he is invited. Hollow thanks the guys for explaining that he can't use magic in battle. He carries only a sword. Shia and Baron immediately get up and ask him out loud. Rise presses his forehead against Hollow's and grabs him by the shoulders, saying that he is a perfect match. The leader explains that Shia is the daughter of a medicine master, but is allergic to pollen, so she can't touch herbs, and Baron is the son of a soldier, but can't use martial magic. Riz confidently states that his father is a priest, but when it comes to reading letters, he absolutely zeroes in on it. He didn't even know the Bible very well. They each have their own flaws, so they decided to be adventurers. When the village abandoned them, Riz further added that it's okay that Hollow doesn't have magic skills. They will help him solve problems that he cannot solve and vice versa. The leader grabs Hollow by the shoulder. Riz confidently reaches out to Hollow and invites him to join their team. Hollow gets up and explains that he might make them feel better, but since they are being invited, he would be happy to join them. The guys talk about how they can't wait to work with Hollow. Hollow soon jumped into the air and swung his sword. Baron says that there are still a few monsters ahead looking at the dead wolf. Hollow asks how many hellhounds are needed. Shia explains that it's about 5. She looks at the pile of corpses and thinks that she's had more than enough. Shia asks Hollow what the hell is going on and if he's really that strong. Baron says it feels like they really picked the right person. Who would have thought that so many hellhounds would come to the nearby road, said Hollow, adding that it was dangerous that as many wild animals as possible should be killed to make the area safer. The Baron wondered what force startled him. Shia explains that he is in charge of the treatment while the Baron does the research. Riz just seems pointless. The leader of the group activates the fire in his palm and explains with a shout that he can also deal with a couple of hellhounds. Hollow begs not to worry because if he accidentally burns something to work with, it makes no sense for him to do so, so he tells him to just stand back and watch out. Riz realizes he is absolutely right in size. Baron notices that this is the first time he has heard him make such sounds. Riz turns around and decides there is nothing he can do. He won't bother Hollow. Suddenly, a muscular monster appears and starts roaring, causing Shia to fall to the ground, but Hollow came in between with his sword. Hollow kills the monster with 1 blow. Hollow immediately goes to Shia and apologizes for losing his alertness. Hollow asks Shia if she is okay, picks her up from the ground, and says thank God that she is safe. Rez watches the action and exclaims that it was so damn cool that he feels like a failure. Baron asks if they will help him solve problems that he cannot, and Shia asks if there is another way around. The leader asks the guys to shut up because he is a leader, which means he didn't need to contribute. Shia immediately replied that Riz was uncool, to which the Baron also tells Riz to stop exposing them and his disgrace. Hollow laughs, pointing out that he has joined a rather interesting squad. He figures to calm them down and tells the guys that Kasumi likes them and this squad is fun. Hollow just feels so much stronger living with them. The men laugh and tell Hollow to put it down and stop being arrogant. Covered in night, the dark-haired man walks down one of the city streets. A strange female voice calls out to him, asking if he knew anything about the incredibly powerful sword. The man asks the figure in black what she is holding, explaining that she is looking for a sword. The townsmen draw his weapons and start fighting with the girl. She explains that it is a majestic sword, and the man asks her to stand still and explains that he is a war veteran. Despite this, the stranger easily bypasses him from the side and says that it does not look like a shame. She grabs the man's weapon and throws it on the floor. The man begins to crumble into pieces and scream loudly. They have big mountains in front of them and they are a little afraid. Orc's Den, a large dungeon that looks like a layered colony. The leader of the team told them even though they have already gone so high up, what is with this amount of orcs? As they got closer, they saw several orcs there with weapons in their hands. That is a layered colony dungeon. In order for the team to defeat the general orc, they had to go through all the layers. At that point, the Baron told them that the orcs were just coming, to which Shia replied that they had almost reached the top. The leader of the team, Riz, ordered them to build a wall so that they can retreat. And then the Baron took his magic wand and shouted, "Wall." Meanwhile, Hollow asked Riz if he couldn't use his flames to wipe them out at once, to which Riz replied that it would be dangerous to use his flames in such a confined space. It will put them all in danger. If Riz uses his fire magic to destroy them with flames, their skin will burn in the process. But it is dangerous to try and retreat on the same route they came from. They are at risk with the orcs waiting for them at the top. Riz, the leader of the group, told them they had no choice. At that moment, Hollow drew his sword and wondered if he could get the orcs' attention. He could do anything himself. Hollow starts running towards the orcs and tells his teammates to leave him alone and go without him, but Riz kept screaming Hollow's name. Hollow, standing aside of orcs, shouted on them, indicating them to come here. Hollow further teased orcs by saying that they all are slow with their big bodies. Hollow was planning on becoming a decoy. Hollow again taunted the orcs for not being able to kill even a rogue fly creature. At that time, Baron said Hollow sucks at that. Hollow staying on guard, taking on this many is really bad. He knows even taking on one orc is tough enough as it is. The Hollow is now crowded with more orcs. Hollow thinks, but this should give other teammates enough time to escape. If he can make a smooth path, he can fight them one way. It will be like one by one. Hollow was with them and ready to deal with the orcs. As he was about to draw his sword, he suddenly heard a loud voice saying ground armor. Hollow was confused and saw Shia coming towards him. He used his magic in a whirlwind. Meanwhile, other teammates arrive. Hollow was completely confused about what they were doing. Both Shia and Baron start attacking on the orcs, and Riz also joins them with his fire magic. Riz screamed as the dragon breathed and his hands burst out flames. There was a huge explosion as all three teammates manipulated their magic to destroy the orcs. Hollow saw that and just thought that extensive flame magic, so that is what this armor was for. But still, this really burns. This armor won't hold up for long. At this point, Shia shouted to Riz that the fire flames had started strong and asked if he was done. Afterwards, he desperately requested to return to the Hollow. The flames were very high, but Riz continued to work his magic. Hollow tried to save himself from those flames. Hollow asked everyone why and told them all right. The flames stopped and everything was fine. Hollow went inside a big hole over there. Baron approached the hole and helped Hollow out. Riz fouled his mouth and told everyone that they had somehow reached the top, while Shia shouting tensely saying Riz's name. Riz told him that he was fine. His throat is just really dry. Further, Shia asked everyone that she will prepare some medicine, and asked everyone if they were all right or if anyone had been burned, to which the Baron replied that they were all right, though if they stayed longer, they would turn into stone statues. Hollow asked everyone why they would all do something so reckless, to which Riz yelled at him for being the reckless one, calling him an idiot. Riz began to cough heavily. Shia told Riz not to raise his voice and gave him some water. Shia held Riz's face from his hand and put some water in Riz's mouth. Riz stopped coughing and asked Hollow why he was trying to fight all alone. Riz also claimed to be the leader of their group and if he agreed to that play earlier. Hollow shouted that it wasn't. That is the concept of sacrifice. Riz shouted loudly, indicating that the Hollows didn't trust them. The Hollow left empty. He felt guilty for making it alone. Riz told Hollow not to even try to think anymore if he thought they were comrades. Hollow agreed without a word. Baron approaches Hollow and calls him Pat by touching Hollow's hair. The Hollow kindly looked at the Baron and called out his name. Laying his hand on Hollow, the Baron told him again that Hollow had always done his best. However, when Hollow jumped right in, he really worried for him. Hollow listened intently to the Baron and felt wrong for doing all that. Hollow apologized for bothering them. Baron told Hollow that he was injured near his wrist. Hollow looked at his wrist and said he is really injured. Shia called to him with first aid. Hollow noticed his wrist burned and told her that it is not that big of a deal though. Shia sighs and tells Hollow that he has always fought alone until now. Hollow was confused by her words. Shia treated Hollow for the scar on his wrist and maintained that they are with him now. She smiled and told him all right, that all for now. Hollow holds his hand wrist where Shia treated his wounds and thinks what a nice team. Hollow asked Riz to listen to him. Riz turned around, but suddenly at that moment something was coming towards them. So Riz shouted, "What was that? Something coming, that is a General Orc." There was a huge big orc in front of them. General Orc supervisors all the orcs. It is superior in all aspects to other orcs such as psychic, intelligence, and more. The General Orc shouted out that his army had been partially wiped out. Hollow is shocked and thinks he can talk. This is the first time he has seen an orc that understands human language. And on top of that, it is really great. The General Orc stood on one side, the Hollow and his team on the other. The General Orc warned them not to think they were living this place alive. At that moment, Riz brought his hand in front of that orc to use his fire magic and shouted for them to fall back. A large light produced towards that orc. Riz's hands are enlightened by the fire flames and further shouted, "Blast thrust." He fires up a big blast towards the General Orc and leaves a big explosion over there. Hollow was shocked to see that. Suddenly Hollow came near Riz and pulled him aside to protect him from the fire flames as the General Orc dodged the fire attack on him. Hollow pulled Riz aside and shouted to watch out. The General Orc holding a weapon in his hand. He was not even haunted a little by those fire flames. There was a lot of smoke around the General Orc. Riz and Hollow fall behind. Riz was shocked to see that his flame hadn't even touched that orc. This guy uses armor of dying flames. To think an orc has a rarity. Behind him, Shia shouted that he had stolen from other adventurers. Riz then asked Hollow if he could destroy the armor. Riz offered to help Hollow and told him to leave. Hollow shouted confidently to leave it to him. Hollow ran with all his might towards the General Orc. Riz warned Hollow not to accidentally run into his attack, to which Hollow replied not to worry about it as he could avoid them, and told Riz to just shoot away. Riz replied even if Hollow says that it scares him. Hollow was now standing in front of the General Orc with his sword. Meanwhile, Riz and Shia show up to the General Orcs with their magic wand in hand. Shouting and using fire arrows and tailwind magic, Hollow leaps into the air with all his might and strength, swinging his sword at the General Orc. Meanwhile, Shia and Riz were working their magic towards the General Orcs behind them. Hollow after swing the sword towards the General Orc, and it starts falling. The General Orc exclaimed that he was too strong for a human. Hollow landed safely on the ground in some distance from that General Orc. Hollow told Riz to up his magic and be ready. The Hollow leaps towards the General Orc with full force and again tries to attack the General Orc with his sword. The General Orc shouted angrily that he would soon break that shield. The General Orc attacked on Hollow with his full power, which results in pushing Hollow behind. Other teammates shouted Hollow's name, but somehow Hollow managed to land safely. The General Orc shouted on Hollow, getting quite cocky for humans like him. This type of shield is just for show. He also asked Hollow how it was now. Is he now satisfied? The General Orc shouted loudly that orcs are born as warriors from the very beginning. Like they did ever be crushed by worms who use magic. Hollow was still standing in front of him, then the General Orc raised his weapon holding in his hand and shouted, "Move out," calling Hollow his brethren. The scene unfolds with Shaq, where Shia is angrily shouting on Hollow that he has totally burned himself, calling him a fool. He lies back on the bed with the bandages all over his back. Hollow is crying, lying on the bed and apologizing. Riz excitedly comments that he's glad they got back to the inn before the storm, to which Baron told he was able to complete the quiz so quickly and thanked Hollow. But the Baron was really surprised. Hollow agrees and sighs. He began to think, asking what could happen. He doesn't really have confidence in himself. He couldn't really use magic, but while he was concentrating on his swordsmanship, he suddenly realized he could cut through magic as well. It was amazing, like wow, he did that. Hollow would dig deeper into the reasons behind it, but since it's so easy right now, it's whatever he seems to be working on. Riz said that if he knew, that Riz was thinking of an ability to shatter sorcery, or so the legend says. Hollow confused, and Shia asked if Hollow knows tales of the brave hero. About 600 years ago, an ominous demon king and his minions suddenly appeared, plunging the world into chaos. But then a hero emerged with the power to slice through magic. With that extraordinary skill, he decimated the demon king and his army, restoring balance to the world. Riz said the hero's power is known as magical damage, a fairly familiar story. Hollow thinks he knows. He also believes that the hero's name is Wilfred Vermilia. It is spread in the province of Asbel, because it comes from the Vermilia family, but still. Hollow holds his head and with a fake smile tells them he just can't believe he has the power they know. He has dug up that myth like crazy. Shai replied clearly that it could be absolutely true. This world exists with extraordinary power just through magic and beyond. Hollow asked about that extraordinary power. Riz interrupted and called out Shia's name, which Shia said she knew, and told Hollow that it is best if he heads back to the inn. It is getting late. Hollow agreed. Riz said he heard the storm was brewing, so it was wise to get back before it started raining. Hollow agreed with him. While Hollow was heading out, Riz also told him that tomorrow, once they had collected their bounty at the guild, they would discuss what would happen next. Hollow moved ahead down towards the stairs, and Kasumi told that it had a hint of something. Hollow replied he won't pry, there are plenty of things he can't talk about either. A man in the reception room asked Hollow what it was. Why is he not staying here? To which Hollow replied that he had already set his tab elsewhere. Hollow dressed like a cloak and moved outside of the shack. Hollow felt the strong wind outside. The man at reception appeared to close the door as Hollow left, but told Hollow that Ridwell has sometimes been swept away by storms at this time, but that if the sword master was around they should be safe from danger. Since all the shops are closed today, it would be wise to return before they close. Hollow turned, holding his head because of storm, and told him he will do just that. Hollow starts walking forward on the street saying that he camped last night. He wants to sleep on the bed that Kasumi said she also. Suddenly, Hollow became very terrified. Kasumi said she felt a strange aura. Hollow asked about the presence. Kasumi told him that her whole body was tingling. Something dangerous lies nearby. Hollow starts moving. Kasumi tells Hollow to be careful. Suddenly, Hollow saw a person in front of him wearing a shack just like him. Hollow was horrified to see the person. The person begins to crumble into pieces. Hollow asked the person who this person is. The person smiled devilishly and said Hollow got the fancy sword on the spot. Hollow thinks this could be the demon sword hunters Cecilia mentioned. Hollow started searching the hallway. The person told Hollow how embarrassing it was. It felt like they had an unwanted guest. This time the Hollow jumped through the wall, but Kasumi told him not to go too far. Jumping up there, Hollow claimed to stumble over a clumsy opponent. The two guards behind the Hollow warned him to not dare to move and called Hollow a knight. Further asked him what he is doing here and calling him a corrupted sword master. After listening, Hollow became very angry. They were told to just throw the weapons aside. He explained that he only heard the commotion and rushed up to the wall. The guard asked Hollow to show him his hand. Hollow agreed and said he looked suspicious but saw no blood on him. The guards also told Hollow to lower his weapon and show his hand. Hollow menacingly agreed, telling them he is putting his weapon away. The guards warned Hollow not to muscle in and pull any funny trick. They were asking him to surrender his weapon. At that point, Kasumi told him to put down his bow. Hollow then said there was no way the guards there questioned what he said. Suddenly, the Hollow cried out that this sword is his very soul. He added that no suspect would ever drop it no matter who ordered it. The guards took their magic wands in their hands and told Hollow to get ready. The guards struck Hollow with their magic wand. Hollow countered that magic with the help of the sword. The guard was surprised to see it and said that they had not. The attack has been thwarted. The defenders don't move and they hit hard. Kasumi asked Hollow why, and Hollow replied that although his suspicions were clear, he couldn't let that damn sword fall into someone else's hands. Hearing the Hollow's words, Kasumi felt emotional as she called out the Hollow's name. The guards constantly attacked Hollow with their magic wands, and Hollow tried to dodge those attacks. As Hollow tried to run away from the guards suddenly appeared in front of Hollow. Hollow is trying to tell the guards that they see the corrosive sword. Take that, Fend. He calls them a case of fallible humans. Hollow keeps running to avoid the attacks. Guards kept firing the cannon, rallying the troops, and told Hollow saying him knights and keep his sword in check, and don't go swooning around the streets. The guards confronted the Hollow and decided to arrest him, saying the Hollow had escaped. At that moment, the Hollow came at the guards with great speed and jumped up from top of the guards. The guards were taken aback by the action, in which one guard said, "What in the world is like that?" and the other guard said, "Don't just stand there in awe," and ordered them to move. Don't let him run away. The guy uses his sword to deflect magic. At that point, Hollow falls on the ground. They saw a big wall in front of him. Kasumi told him that it is a dead end. They seemed to have no choice but to fight. Hollow said he really wanted to stay out of the duel with the knights. At this point, Hollow heard the guard's voice searching for the Hollow as they just turned that corner. Hollow was terrified and told Kasumi that she might have to get a little rough. Hollow grabbed the sword and threw it at the wall, screaming for mercy. Kasumi was confused by his actions. The blade plunged into the wall. Kasumi said what a terrible idea to come up with. Hollow starts running towards the wall and jumps over the wall and yells at Kasumi, to which Kasumi replies to leave it on. As Hollow was about to grab the sword, she turned into a girl and held Hollow's hand. The girl jumped off the wall and transformed back into a sword. The guards were shocked to see this. One of the guards said he was just turning that corner where the other guard asked if they had finally rounded their corner. The guard said he wasn't here and indicated he was on top of the hut overlooking the guards. One of the guards said he must be joking. Even with wind magic, such heights cannot be cleared. The hollow above told Kasumi that the only way seemed to be to jump over the walls and pause for her, to which Kasumi replied that she gets this is another night under the stars for them. Then the hollow jumped from the other side of the wall and said that the cursed sword master would no longer roam with him. Hollow started running and got scared. Suddenly, he was attacked and somehow managed to jump away. Hollow was sitting on the ground, and a strong storm occurred. Hollow shouted who was going there. Suddenly, a lot of smoke occurs in front of him. Throughout the smoke, the shadow of the corpse was shown, telling the hollow that he had dodged his attack. Hollow was completely confused, wondering what that incredibly large pressure was. The shadow of his body appeared, holding a sword. The voice appears that he had crossed paths with Hollow while dispatched for storm duty. Looks like he's running out of luck, doomed sword master. The hollow tensely believes that he is so overwhelmed by the loudness that he cannot even speak. This guy's no ordinary foe. The person in front of the hollow told him that her job was to protect the people of this earth and to eliminate anything that threatened human life. The woman was seen wearing a tall and glorious shack-like suit with long hair and a sword in her hand. She introduces herself as Valentine Ashcroft, 14th Sword Saint of the prestigious Order of Royal Knights. This is the sword of the nations rising to the challenge. Hollow wonders if Kensai is a sword saint, thinking of how the bad situation has worsened. Hollow told her that it was a misunderstanding. He is not the one who corrupts the sword. The sword saint asked what that is. Quite the young one, and a boy is it. The sword saint also told Hollow that the reporter said the woman was a blade owner, to which Hollow asked if he said it was a case of mistaken identity. The sword saint laughed and said there was no way he was going to miss her based on such a sloppy verification. Hollow thought carefully. The sword saint also told Hollow if he was making fun of the knights. If he is innocent, accept the question. Running away means he has something to hide. Hollow thinks so. If the knights investigate, they can reveal his true identity, and if the Vermilions find out, there will be real trouble. Above all, he can't let anyone know he's holding a damned sword. For now, the only option is to escape. It's sad that he'll at least save Kasumi. The sword saint smiled devilishly and said that was a total surprise. Hollow really thinks he can get away with it. The following shall be tightly bound. They two face each other and begin to fight out with their swords. As he fights, Hollow has been thrown out. He couldn't handle it. They are continuously fighting with swords, swinging their swords at each other. Hollow tried his best to dodge her attack, but the sword saint was fighting with all her power. At this point, the sword saint swung the sword hard at Hollow, causing Hollow to push back, but he somehow managed to land on the ground. Meanwhile, Hollow thinks he hesitated to block it with the one-handed sword. Even from a crouched position, the strength at their core slices with relentless tenacity. The strikes were a testament to their refined balance and power. Hollow also believes that his blow outweighs that of any orc by miles, thinking of the sword saint as a monster. With such vast combat experience, it is quite impossible to escape any favor. At that moment, it started to rain. The sword saint asked if the atmosphere had just changed. Hollow thinking deeply, and with an evil grin, the sword saint said this is great fun. Sword saint said she is personally intrigued and she made up her mind. She will reveal his name after all. The sword saint raised her sword and said she would arrest him and force him to reveal his master's name. Their duel ends here. From now on, his battle is with Magic Sword Man. The sword saint pointed her sword at Hollow and asked him to give it all back. Suddenly the sword saint strikes with her sword, which the Hollow tells her how far she is willingly to go for him. It was raining heavily. Hollow tries to dodge her attack but falls back. Now the battle was more intense. Hollow does his best to avoid her attack. Sword Saint said absolutely fantastic, immediately considering its skill-sensitive reaction speed. Even soldiers cannot use their swords so gracefully. Hollow responds positively, and to be honest, he would love to be with a sword master like her. He needs to be pumped for attack. The Hollow told her that he no longer had the treasure. Sword Saint smiled and told Hollow what's wrong if he wasn't paying attention. How he feels like that is the real edge of the sword. The Sword Saint attacks the Hollow with her magic from various angles, with the Hollow jumping up and intercepting all of her attacks. The Sword Saint rushed off and told Hollow that he was indeed dang. The pothold superpass is her wildest idea. An incredible technique she has never witnessed before. Is that sword for real? The Sword Saint further told him it has been ages since she had this much fun, referring that she found Hollow. Hollow and Sword Saints were fighting, and the guards came and shouted to look there. There was the Sword Saint, whom the other guards called a fool if they fought the Sword Saint. The guard took their magic wand in their hands and aimed at the hollow. They were joining forces with the Sword Saint and fired on the hollow. Such an act shocked the Sword Saint. There were several fireballs near the hollow where the hollow jumped up and dodged them all at once with his sword. Fire spray began to fall and heavy rain began to fall. The attack doesn't even touch hollow, and defenders wonder if their attack was just empty. The Sword Saint shouted wouldn't they dare intervene. They were no match for the hollow. This was her fight to knock down her opponent. The Sword Saint took her blade, and with this action the guards were frightened. Those whom one of the guards told him that this was wrong would be arrested and ordered to return. Another guard asked what on earth was going on, to which the guard replied unobtrusively that he didn't know the Lord of Swords was a master of storm magic who cleared a huge storm 2 years ago. It was then that the Sword Saint began casting her strong magic and a violent storm began in heavy rain. The guard asked if that was just a rumor. The Sword Saint told them that it was okay. The Sword Saint was here again this year to prepare for the storm. She pointed to the giant storm above them and told them that the sky there goes wild. It comes down, and not only does she not clear the storm, but she absorbs it. The Sword Saint continued to work her magic, saying that this was a rare opportunity to show her full power against a human. Thinking of how Hollow will react to it. Hollow said strong magic has been for years. He has seen this colossal spell from MS. Hollow enthusiastically told the Sword Saint how interesting magic, the art of witchcraft, to which Kasumi replied that this was no time for daydreaming. Hollow said that when the chips are down, he just wants to run away with nothing but a handful of stardust. Kasumi asked what he was talking about. Hollow just wasn't someone he could lose. The Hollow believed that magic is a wonderful gem, a testament to the wisdom and insight of their ancestors. But sadly, the gods did not give him that gift. Instead, Kasumi handed him her gift, their crystal spirit and relentless training. Sword art is the art of cutting. Hollow confidently stated that Sword Saint Valentine would rise to the challenge with this blade, to which Sword Saint exclaimed for how fun and exciting it was to ask Hollow what he got, and let him bear all that he is and shine. The Sword Saint activates her magic saying Dragon Storm Slash, unleash the storm of the dragon. With that, a large dragon appeared in front of Hollow. The dragon was so powerful that the entire sky there turned black. The dragon shot a huge fireball at the Hollow. Hollow was trying his best to avoid the attack as he flew through the air. He used all his strength but could not avoid it. Meanwhile, Kasumi shouted Hollow's name. The Sword Saint was happy to see him. Hollow was on the verge of losing. He hoped that even the gods could lose the truth under the moonlight. If there is a second chance, he wants another destiny. The Sword Saint was saying farewell to Hollow, calling him Swordmaster. But suddenly Hollow jumps through the dragon and uses his glowing claws, the power of the sword, to knock the dragon down 3 times. Seeing that, the Sword Saints and guards there were shocked, and at that moment a lot of fireworks began covering the sky, showing a beautiful view of night fireworks. The guard over there said awesome and asked if they had seen that, to which the other guard was amazed and asked what just happened. A guard told the master swordsman, "What is this?" The Sword Saint had taken him down. The Sword Saint told how it appeared. To be perfectly honest, the great magic seemed to have disintegrated and dissolved in the mist, the guardian said. The Sword Saint told as she was assessed, seeming to use her magic as a stepping stone to escape. The Sword Saint declared that she had stopped her magic with her sword. He was quite brave. Guards said they would continue to investigate and follow up. The Sword Saint was pleased with this, that to slice through magic the blade of magic severance. Hollow somehow managed to escape and made it to safety. Kasumi told the Hollow that it was strange for her to withstand such an attack, to which the Hollow replied that he imagined he couldn't do anything. He added that he could think of using the attack to jump over the walls once more. Suddenly, Hollow wasn't feeling well, so Kasumi asked if he was okay. He seemed to be in pain, and their nearby inn was not available. Hollow began vomiting large amounts of blood. He fell to the ground and began to feel very low. Kasumi asked if he was kidding and shouted Hollow's name. They reached the base of Riz and his team. Kasumi started knocking on their door as everyone went upstairs. The Baron approached the door and asked if anyone was going there at this late hour, to which Kasumi replied that Hollow is in critical condition. Baron and Shia were puzzled when they opened the door and found Kasumi carrying Hollow on her back. They laid Hollow down on the bed in critical condition. The team member asked what on earth happened with the Hollow, and Hollow replied he had some trouble with the knights when he returned, taking a direct hit from the Saint of Swords. Riz asked about the Sword Saint as well as how it happened. Shia examined Hollow and mentioned that there weren't any significant external injuries, indicating it could be an internal problem. Hollow's breathing is shallow, and he is in critical condition. Hollow was about to faint, so everyone there asked if he was alright, and Hollow asked why Riz and others were here. Kasumi said he actually came all the way here. Hollow asked surprisingly, and of course he unconsciously leaned against Riz, and his legs just led him here. Riz, Shia, and Baron were confused. Hollow further told them that he is okay, and he is just sleepy, so asked them to let him rest a little, to which Kasumi shouted no way and asked to get a grip. Shia told Kasumi that if she really wanted to help the Hollow, she would have to swear that she would never tell what she was about to find out. Kasumi vowed to swear something and asked if the Hollow could actually be saved, to which Shia said she couldn't promise. At that time, Shia took her magic wand and said if this power can save him, then yes. She activates her magic to heal and rise. A great light began to gather in her wand. Hollow opened his eyes and stood up. Hollow said the pain subsided and asked Shia what she was doing. Shia happily told him that there are wonderful powers in this world that go beyond magic. This is the power of witches. She embraced it. She carries the witch blood that the Baron asked the witch inside her. Hollow said they disappeared several years ago. Shia said it was right about that. Centuries ago, witches were feared for their power and hunted down. They claim that the bloodline has been severed. But that is not the truth. The witches have quietly hidden away, continuing to pass on their bloodline and claiming that she is their descendants. Hollow is surprised by this and says how it is an amazing ability to heal wounds. With this ability, she really needs to get herself used to it. Riz said, but the witch's power can't stop there. Witches can amplify their magic through rigorous training. If the child born is a girl, she can pass her magic down to their children. Hollow panicked and asked to wait, so it makes sense. Riz said that if their magic was enriched over generations, they could unleash the unimaginable power that the Hollow answered, and that was why witches were so feared that they persecuted them. He asks Riz to hold on for a second and asks why he tells them such a dangerous secret. If this statement is true, if more people knew about the existence and power of a witch, Shia will surely be preyed upon by those who covet his greatness. This is a matter of life and death for Shia. Both Riz and Shia glare at each other, and Riz asks Hollow if he wants to stand by them on this. A journey to destroy the power of witches. Hollow begged to lose witch power. Shia said she wants to use this power for the benefit of others, but her future child could face cruelty. Baron said that in a world thriving on magic, just having Shia power can spell danger. Shia sighs and says that she wants to be able to choose to be free of this power. Riz told them that's why they were traveling to find the blood sage who knew the way. Kasumi claims to be a living legend who has seen the world for centuries since the time of the Demon King and Hero. That one might just know the secret behind Hollow's magic destruction power. Hollow asked if she was talking about him. Suddenly a voice starts coming from the window. When they looked down from the window, guards were asking if there was any night. Hollow told Kasumi that he thought he couldn't stay in this town anymore. Hollow then said to Riz that he would accompany them to meet the Sage of Blood and advise them to continue the journey with just their team. Kasumi thinks the witch's blood that can pass down the immense magical power of descendants. If this strength becomes public knowledge, Shia will be snatched up by the nobility. They might be reduced to mere tools, forced to beat children just to harvest that power. Shia's child would then be nothing more than a pawn in their power games, facing the same fate at their new home. This is still a relatively mild scenario. She further thinks to herself, what if she got caught by a slavery? She can't even bear to think about it. Hollow asked about a power that can heal. He wonders what kind of energy powers this force. Kasumi says it's starting. That is the basic idea of the modern understanding of magic, for which Shia explains that mobile magic uses natural forces and can be accessed by anyone. Witchcraft abilities are special gifts given through a particular lineage. But magic is just a trick that mimics the powers of witches born long ago. Hollow asked, wondering if that was really true. The sorcerer's powers are an improved version of the original magic source, so that means witch powers can do healing that magic can't. Before magic, humans were the weakest of all species. With the birth of sorcery, humans finally gained the ability to compete with other species. The power of witches is central to the development of human history. Hollow also asked how they could be completely unknown. There may be many secrets hidden there as well. The Hollow said excitedly that he had to meet the Blood Sage soon. Kasumi grabbed Hollow's shoulder and told him to calm down, saying that is enough for today. Hollow said he needs to sleep better at night. Riz felt sleepy and told Kasumi and Hollow to just stay over here at night. Baron inquired about the bed, and then Riz and Baron settled on one bed, giving their other bed to Hollow. Kasumi and Shia were sharing a bed for sleeping. At the same time, Kasumi was feeling uneasy because she simply wanted to cozy up next to the restless Hollow. At that moment, Shia woke up and went outside. Kasumi sees this and follows her. Shia looked up at the sky, and Kasumi came behind her and asked Shia if she couldn't sleep. Shia confessed to Kasumi about her inability to shake off her wakefulness and feeling buzzing. This marked the first time she had opened up to someone other than Riz and the others. Kasumi then called out Shia's name and questioned why Shia chose to share her secret with her. Hollow may have fought on the same team but never said a word. Shia said Kasumi fought them. Kasumi asked her about her secret, and Shia told her that she knew everything. Kasumi asked angrily why. Shia began sharing that during the initial night of battling General Oak when Hollow fell asleep, the three of them were having a chat. Their teammates advised Shia to go to bed early and get some rest. While Hollow was sleeping with his sword, in the middle of the night, Shia woke up and saw the sword transformed into Kasumi. Shia pulled Kasumi aside when she was half asleep and expressed that if they were ever caught off guard and stunned, she would have reverted back to the sword. Shia mentioned that until then, Hollow converses with his sword and refers to it with a woman's name. She thought about how lonely and isolated Hollow seemed to be. Kasumi and Shia burst into laughter. Kasumi said to Shia that if Hollow discovers what happened, she'll be in deep trouble. Kasumi couldn't believe she transformed back into a person while half asleep. Shia assured Kasumi that she wouldn't tell anyone about it. Kasumi said that Shia is like her own stuff. Both are keepers of secrets. Shia maintained that she had decided to stop living in hidden fear. Being in the outside world, it takes courage to be able to trust others. Kasumi approached Shia, took her hand, and mentioned that Shia has a talent for understanding people. Kasumi reassured Shia that she would protect her, along with Hollow. They shared a moment of happiness as they exchanged glances. The next day they all raised their badges saying the level up to the Azure rank, up to new heights. Riz excitedly mentioned that they captured the prize for taking down the General Oak, so let's hit breakfast while they picture their next big adventure. Karen and Cheyenne were coming towards them tensely, shouting Hollow's name. Hollow was happy to see them. He began to tell them that he had been promoted to the Azure rank. Karen grabbed Hollow by the shoulder and shouted, "Who cares about this nonsense?" She also yelled at him that he was now a wanted criminal. Behind him, Cheyenne showed him a flyer. Everyone over there looked at that paper. On that flyer, a figure was printed resembling Hollow with red hair, bright red, carrying a sword. Average height, a teenager, and a reward for capturing someone, the key figure and the swordmaster of the corruption-slashing incident. Hollow became very terrified after seeing that flyer and read that it described someone using a bizarre technique to slice magic with a magic sword. Hollow said it must be about him. Karen was screaming loudly on the Hollow about what he was doing on Earth, telling him that the soldiers distribute leaflets throughout the city. Adventurers are gunning for this too. He better stay away from the guild. Hollow thinks ominously that he's so glad he stopped by the guild before the news broke. Riz said in a situation like this, hold on with no other option. He ordered them to leave the city immediately. Hollow wore his cloak and said his bad. Karen and Cheyenne saw a few people coming towards them. Karen told them a messenger from the Knight's Order had arrived. While they hold them off, Hollow and the team escape. They start running out of town, Hollow holding Kasumi's hand. Hollow stepped back and thanked them both. He also told them when they saw Cecilia to please tell her about it. Karen excitedly tells him that she paid the debt and Cheyenne tells them to stay safe. Karen and Cheyenne begin to distract the messenger there. Meanwhile, Hollow and his team escape. There are many people in this city. Hollow and his team were leaving the city at the time. Hollow turned back and thought of Ridwell City first. Kasumi tells Hollow to leave, which Hollow agrees. Hollow asked his team where they were going next, to which Riz replied that that was what they were supposed to be doing. Telling them about the capital Orpheus, Hollow smiled and told Orpheus and began to think that Mrs. Sarah would be sure to rock up at her place when they reached the capital. He also believes that the palace capital is home to Sarah's teacher's residence and her brother Alarin's night brigade, and he did not forget brother Quen's royal education. Kasumi asked the Sage of Blood. Kasumi sighs, placing her hand on her stomach and saying that she feels all fuzzy and lost about that name. It seems to linger and sink into her mind. Hollow thinks yes, it is definitely better than the throat. Hollow smiles and tell, speaking of which they haven't eaten anything since morning. Riz replied that they forgot to find people. Let's find some food first. Riz happily agreed with Hollow. They all sit down together and start eating. After a while, they start moving forward towards their destination. They reached a gate and crossed it, where they reached a large city. Shia pointed to the town and asked them to look at the bustling post town. It looks like it can be done before sunset in that area. Once they reach that village, next time they take a horse. They all are very happy and heading towards the village. Hollow was being happy. Suddenly, a voice told that she found Hollow, and then a woman with long hair and a large sword ran towards them. They were all scared and confused. The woman attacks Baron and Shia once with her sword and also cuts Ray's wrist. Hollow saw the handcuffs fall from Ray's waist in front of him. Hollow was shocked, and Kasumi screamed Hollow's name at that moment. The unconscious bubbles begin to be obtained in Riz, Shia, and Baron where they are cut down by the woman's sword. Kasumi holds Hollow's hand as she repeats Hollow's name. Hollow threatened to ask if she was a corrupt sword master, and the woman laughed at him and said that she had no idea, but that she did when it came to hunting for mythical swords. Holding Hollow's hand, Kasumi turned into a sword. The woman in front of the Hollow tells him that she holds a magic sword just like him, identifying herself as Lydia, and further asked Hollow about his little magic sword, and she is definitely going to take it. The two began to fight each other with their swords. Hollow shouted angrily not to mess with him. Kasumi told Hollow to not lay a finger on the sword of corruption. On the other hand, Riz, Baron, and Shia were struggling with their wounds. Shia shouted that there was no way, corruption was spreading. Hollow thinks he was that stupid. Cecilia warned him of the danger. He covered everyone with chaos. Riz was behind the woman trying to attack her, but then the woman turned around and called Riz an idiot and fired arrows at Riz. Riz was badly injured when he was attacked by a woman. The woman smiled and told Riz that his hair was signed. If it were his dominant hand, he would be in real trouble. Hollow angrily screamed at women, "Don't you dare lay a hand on his friends. Face him instead." She laughed and said it wasn't perfect by any means because they wove together. Love, friendship, relationships. It will turn into a bubbling, gooey mess of nothing. It's not nice to ask Hollow. Hollow screamed what in the world she was and asked for her identity. Hollow also wondered why she was after a magic sword. The woman replied if Hollow don't know that when he gathers all 9 magic swords something truly marvelous happens. They are the Ordebaron cult. A delightful friend with plans to resurrect the Dark Lord Ordebaron. She doesn't really do that in the Demon Lord. On the other side, the Baron painfully called Shia, to which Shia told she is going to tentacles him right now. Baron screamed in pain that forgot about him and just used her healing magic. Shia was confused and began to think that the witch's power might just work as a healer, but the witch's power was so strong that it could drain her magic. She can't continuously use it. Shia also thinks Baron knows that too. She can only use this once. She can only save one person. Shia became very panicked, thinking who was referring to help them. Hollow asked the woman about the Dark Lord and what she was talking about. Hollow thinks it has nothing to do with Riz and the others. He must save them quickly. It's his fault they're in this mess. He cannot think clearly. They must be rescued immediately. With no one else able to move, luring this guy away to a spot where everyone is safe from magic is their best bet. Riz screamed Hollow's name. Shia was very worried to see Riz in that condition. Riz said he is the leader of this group. He was the one who brought Hollow into this crew, and ordered to quit that frowning. He further said it's not just his responsibility. They all pitch in for one another. That's their party. Hollow worriedly took Riz's name. Hollow sighed and confidently told everyone to hang in tight. The woman smiled devilishly. Hollow also said he would wrap this up in no time. The woman laughed and said it was absolutely fabulous. This is top-notch and was exactly how it should be. She also said that she would close that unwavering spiritual heart, breaking it. In that moment she was mesmerized by pleasure, pure pleasure. Kasumi told Hollow to be careful. The woman can easily wield a greatsword and is an insane authoritarian. Hollow really thinks Lydia's arrow serves no purpose. She is just having a blast playing with people. The bodies of Riz, Baron, and Shia slowly turn into foam. The woman said that this was where the real show began, called the Hollow Sweetheart, and then asked him to show her the power of his magic sword. Hollow was furious now. Now he dodged the woman's onslaught of rifles and mud cannons. Hollow asked Kasumi if they clash she won't just melt away, to which Kasumi replied she refuses to be defeated by a sword that is just big and bulky. She added that it was very important to take care of him. With that cursed cut, he turned into a foam and broke out of the wound. Hollow said no way. If just a scratch can turn things to foam, a light and slender sword will be just fine. He gambled to trigger that jump, telling Kasumi to land the deadly blow. The woman said the energy he felt was great, but if he ran around he would just tire himself out. The Hollow was ready to attack and ordered Kasumi to get ready. Then Hollow ran full force towards the woman and cracked open with his sword, splashing with his sword, saying soil, spear, ground, javelin. Both blades collided. The woman was a little confused and thinks that's super fast, and his strength is just amazing for a kid. Hollow then splashed the sword with both rock explosions and thick foul air. The woman exclaimed that that cursed sword could rebel against magic. That's incredible. Now she absolutely craves it. Hollow then asked Kasumi what exactly Lydia was saying when she mentioned the power of the magic sword, to which Kasumi showed no answer. Hollow then thought with a smile, clueless. The woman asked Hollow if it wasn't the magical sword's power to absorb spells. Hollow measures devil listener. The woman also said that seriously she didn't think that because she was a magic sword, she could be human. The woman then told Hollow to get ready. She goes to show her the true power of the magic sword. The sword the woman is holding begins to foam. The woman told to call it corrosion is utterly outrageous. Her magic is a mystical darling that melts everything into a 4D delight. After a while the woman's sword turned into quite a foam, and she told that her little bubble wanted to be friends with him. He was about to attack Hollow. Kasumi manipulated Hollow to tell him to be careful. Baron, on the other hand, has been very critical, with Shia worriedly calling Baron's name. At that point, Riz saw the situation and tried to attack the women with fireballs. The woman said no way, that kid's done for. With those injuries the foam will eat away at them in no time. She added that Hollow may walk small on his feet, but now he carries the weight of 3 lives. She will turn that tension into a swirling mess for him, like heat. Suddenly the woman aimed her sword towards Hollow and said, "Bog down in the muck." Hollow then becomes terrified seeing that, and he thinks of the wide-range magic of the dark arts. They'll all get into that quagmire if they keep doing it. On the other side, the Baron's whole body was about to be covered in foam, but suddenly he picked up his magic wand from the ground and said, "Trailblazing fortification." Baron told Hollow he would set up a footstool and not worry about them. "Put that thing down." With Baron's magic, the Hollow moved forward with more energy and said he would be there in a moment to hang tight until then. Shia took Baron's name, who told her to quickly use her healing and make a run for it. Hollow keeps them busy, and she has to escape herself. Baron's face was completely frozen, and he told Shia it was only a matter of time before she drowned in the mud. He can't hold his support much longer. Shia sadly thinks she is the one running away. Is she leaving everyone to fight? Baron further said he wants that for both him and Riz, and not to blame Hollow. He begged her to do so. He just wants them to live and find happiness. Shia asked seriously as she cried. She has always known deep down, as she lived like a shadow in the village, an outsider in her own skin. Baron was always there as his vigilant bodyguard. Shia took his magic wand and apologized. She wept bitterly and apologized to the Baron. Shia stood up with a magic wand in both hands, causing a great glow, and said that Baron had always been her protector, so why did he leave her unprotected? On the other hand, the woman told Hollow there is a huge gap in the back. Suddenly, after the woman attacked Hollow, he was pushed behind and saw that the ground had vanished beneath him. Hollow wonders what a monster with such physical powers, but sadly her guide can no longer lift a finger. Hollow tensely thinks of Baron. The woman smiled and told Hollow that his ability to cancel magic was interesting. He is absolutely ridiculous as a cursed belt, and told him to watch closely now. Thus the power of the magic sword of invincibility is released. The woman ran towards the Hollow with all her might. Hollow somehow managed to avoid the attack, but was hit in the leg by the woman's sword. Hollow shivered and remembered the muddy swamp is bubbling and churning. The woman said her precious bubbles could dissolve anything. She will take her time tormenting him from here. She further asked if he fused the traits of the earth magic with those of the enchanted sword. The woman further used her magic on Hollow, saying trailblazing fortification. Due to which Hollow was covered with a lot of attack. Hollow tried his best to hold it, in which the woman said was incredibly strange, but how long could they keep this up? Hollow thinks he's barely holding out. If this continues, a fatal blow is inevitable. The woman was about to attack on the Hollow again, saying that life is fleeting and ephemeral, which makes it even more beautiful. The woman laughed loudly and said fizz and scatter like bubbles. The Hollow was shocked by what he saw, and suddenly he was attacked violently. He was unable to do anything, and was about to be fully covered with her magic. Then a voice, King Phoenix Arrow, wings of the Flame Emperor. Suddenly, all of the woman's magic disappeared. Hollow saw Riz coming towards him. Riz asked Hollow if he was okay and told to lead the backup for him. Hollow saw that Riz was fine and thinks the erosion from the corrosive foam had disappeared. Riz somehow able to attack women with fire magic. Hollow took his sword and moved forward. At that moment, Baron used his trailblazing fortification and claimed that he was stuck in the swamp-like rise. Baron was also recovered and asked this Hollow if they were both alright. Kasumi told that Shia is using her healing magic. At that point, Shia was about to save them. Her magic, her life. She wants to throw everything away in this life, and then Shia shout, what is the point of the power of a witch? Such strength. Shia used her magic wand seen in the sky above. Kasumi told Hollow that Shia use any more power, she is pushing her limits. Hollow asked if it was dangerous. The woman was attacked with fireballs, to which she screamed that her face, her body was scarred. She screamed, how dare he leave her marks. Hollow then shouted at the woman that the pain was just a word compared to the weight of life he had trampled on, to which the woman screamed she won't forgive him, calling him a brat. Hollow further screamed he is right there with her. The woman warned Hollow to get ready. The woman ran into the Hollow, and Hollow held his sword and told her to come out, Lydia. He also told her to bring this war to a great end. The woman used her magic towards Hollow, saying, unleash the chaos. Hollow was confidently armed with his sword, his magic touching, and he made a circle around it, letting dance in a whirlwind of joy. He successfully dodged her attack, and the woman fell to the ground and said she couldn't stand it, living on in such an ugly way. Asking to wrap this up, Hollow realized it was much easier to just pull over and fight and survive. Then she will truly understand the burden of life. The woman fell to the ground. Kasumi ran to Shia and shouted her name, and Baron held Shia and told her that it was all over. Riz and him are safe and sound. Hollow was holding Riz in his arms. Kasumi exclaimed, looking at the nonchalant thing to do. Baron held Shia, and Shia said, thank goodness, they are both safe. Kasumi says Shia's wounds are already healing, to which Shia starts saying when she used her healing, she thought she would help them by losing something. It's like something has exploded inside her. Kasumi said it's not surprising that when she's in a pinch, unexpected powers can come out. Shia saying she feels like she's being protected. Hollow holding Riz came near them and said, bound by blood for 6 centuries, thanking to countless witches. Riz said happily that they actually got through it. Shia smiled and said it was the team that led them to victory. Riz, Shia, Baron, Hollow, and Kasumi all sat down and said they were all united. They fought for their comrades. Together they won this fierce battle.